slow play it.
We're good.
Worked out well.
Thank you. Sorry. Nobody else will be up there before me.
Yep.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Can folks hear me? It's lights on. Okay, roll call, please.
Good morning, members of the Joint Appropriations Committee. It's June 21st. Representative Henderson. Representative Larson. Representative Sherwood. Representative Stith.
Here.
Representative Walters.
Here.
Representatives Wanitzer Dave. Senator Anderson.
Here.
Senator Garou.
Here.
Senator Nethercott. Senator Salazar.
Here.
Co-Chairman Kinski. Here. Mr. Chairman.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
So with this echo in this building, it's kind of like you're supposed to say, in this corner. Okay, going to the agenda, we'll just get started and start plugging away. The first item on the agenda is comprehensive review of gaming, and first on that list is Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd start by, I think, deferring to our counsel and Tamara Revley and have her give a little background on the research that we requested at our Laramie meeting, maybe provide that, and then we would move into the bill drafts. And my hope, Mr. Chairman, with your blessing, is we would work those bill drafts in an individual fashion and not hear all of them at the same time. That works for you, and so that's a roadmap to get us started. I'd defer to Tamara for a brief history lesson that got us to where we are today.
Sure, that works for me. And I've had a couple of folks tell me that they have a limited window of public comment. And so if anyone that wants to take us out of order as we proceed, I know Representative Davis would like to jump in and have some comments before that. I think Dave Pickeringhead has someone with him who's on a limited agenda, but I don't think it's going to take a lot of time to go through at least the first 3 or 4 bills. But as we proceed, if there are any comments or if anyone else needs to just come up and let us know if they need to jump in as we're moving, just kind of give us the wink of an eye and we'll accommodate. This is pretty informal, really, at this stage of the game. And this really our first time really kind of starting to delve into the gaming side. And we all know that we've got a long way to go and a lot to learn. And so with that, Tamara, please proceed.
Tamara Revley here. Myself and Karen Vaughn staffed the working group, and the working group was chaired by Representative Walters. Also on the group was Chairman Nicholas. And then we had Representative Larson, Senator Salazar, and Senator Garou. Haven't had a lot of time since our May meeting, but the working group dove right in, and they met remotely via Zoom to talk about where they'd like to see the group go and what kind of work they'd like to do. Then they also met with the Gaming Commission at the Gaming Commission's building to learn more about their operations. The working group came up with 4 bill draft requests and also several requests for research. So the bill drafts you all have in front of you or posted online, but they're research focused on ways to deal with responsible gaming. How are other states addressing responsible gaming and social impacts? How are other states limiting the number of historic horse racing terminals if they allow that? How are other states tying their purses or mandating what their purses are, or are they just up to the market to decide? for horse racing. That is what is won by the horse that wins the race. And then finally, what are other states doing about iGaming? Is there any way to geofence or restrict iGaming? And so those were some of the issues that the working group is still looking at. We didn't post that research, but it is some topics that will be explored if the working group wishes. Then the working group's work that they're ready to bring to you are within the bill drafts themselves. And I can begin whenever you're ready on, we'll start with 62. That's LSO 0062. It's called Gaming Amendments.
Tamara, just walk through what bills are, that we have, just so everyone can see the big picture for the day.
Want to make sure I've got a comprehensive pile here.
Should have 0062. This is gaming amendments. This is kind of a conforming bill. Some of the topics that the working group felt like they could handle, it relates to all types of gaming, parimutuel gaming, skills-based gaming, and online sports wagering. And it amends some definitions and raises the age. Then you have 53, 0053.
Breakage.
Yep, that relates to live events where there's breakage, parimutuel events. Then you have 51, which relates to municipal, city, and towns approval for parimutuel events. And then lastly, the big bill, the long bill is 0054, which would transfer the Gaming Commission to the Department of Revenue and then consolidate the various regulations on gaming into one title, into Title IX.
Go, Chair. Then I've got 51 muni approval.
Yes, that should have been the third bill I stated.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
And then we've got one from the County Commissioners Association.
Correct.
And that doesn't have a number.
That's not an official LSO bill draft. That's what's proposed by the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. And so if you want to move forward with that concept, we would take it back and put it in LSO form.
And in a nutshell, what does it do?
That would give counties more regulatory approval over parimutuel events, simulcasting.
Okay?
So we'll take that one after the LSO bills, just do a rough outline of it, depending on the time and public comment. See how far we get down the road with that one.
So now we're back on 62, the conforming amendments.
Right, thanks, 62. And Representative Davis, did you want to, before we actually jump into the bills, did you want to get up now, or do you have a particular preference on when you want to address the committee? Okay, just want to check and see. All right, please proceed.
So maybe before we start, I'll just talk about the types of gaming and then the types of gaming that this bill relates to. And so we have parimutuel events, and in statute, these are all within the department or the title on agriculture. And within parimutuel events, there is simulcasting. And then as a type of simulcasting are the things that you hear about: historic horse racing, advanced deposit wagering, as well as live racing. Not just horse racing, but live, other live events are permitted, like rodeo, professional roping, etc. And so those are all parimutuel events. When you amend parimutuel events, you're amending all of those things. When you amend simulcasting, you're only amending a portion of those. Simulcasting is a type of a parimutuel event or a type of parimutuel wagering under Wyoming statutes. And that is probably one of the most confusing things about the statutes, is that these things that are getting a lot of attention, historic horse racing, they don't have a lot of statutes. They don't have their own section where you can go through and look through how does somebody apply to own historic horse racing games. All that we have is simulcasting and some minimal statutes on simulcasting.
Co-Chair, just to make sure I'm following Tamara, I thought I heard you say that HHR, advanced deposit racing, and all other live events, rodeo, et cetera, are subcategories of simulcasting, or they're categories unto themselves?
They are within simulcasting
Okay.
subcategories, and that also includes off-track betting for purposes of the statutes. And so that's somewhat confusing that when you make a change to parimutuel events, you affect everything. When you make a change to simulcasting, you affect everything except live racing and live events. So this bill draft, and then outside of that, we have skills-based amusement games. They have their own section. They're pretty easy to see that you're changing. And then online sports wagering, which again is one of the more recent things that Wyoming statutes have passed, and those statutes are nicely organized and nicely identifiable. But where I think things get confusing is the parimutuel events and how simulcasting is a part of that, as well as live racing and off-track betting. So I'll jump into 25 LSO 0062. What this bill would do is some general amendments that were directed by the working group. And then it would amend definitions for skills-based gaming and then raise the age to 21 for those types of gambling that are still 18 that are regulated. It doesn't change the unregulated or the charitable gaming. The bingo is still 18. Calcutta wagering, societal gaming isn't regulated or changed by this. So page 1 of the bill just talks a little bit about what the working group tried to do was to look through the statutes and look for definitions. We heard at the last meeting that there were quite a few definitions that could be confused or that could be conformed better. You know, in looking through all the definitions and the different types of gaming, I didn't find that a lot of definitions would lend themselves to conforming. I did find that there was some confusion possibly in some of the definitions, but I thought more of the conforming issues probably related to substantive items, like different types. You go to the commission in different ways to apply for a permit versus a license. That, of course, distribution of proceeds is different for every type of gaming. And there are lots of sort of duplicative statutes on getting your fingerprinting and licensing. And so some of that probably could be conformed for better drafting of statutes and easier interpretation by the entities that have to live under them and work under them. But it wasn't as simple as just conforming a definition. It would really require digging through and seeing where you can conform processes and procedures. And so that bill doesn't do that. This bill is sort of thought of as the working group as the low-hanging fruit. But I do welcome stakeholders in the working group to identify areas that they think should be conformed further that causes issues for them. The first change is on page 3 under 924-105. This is the online sports wagering statute, and this would change the age from 18 to 21 to be able to participate in online sports wagering. And then the next change is on page 4. One thing that I did think might be confusing was the terminology of operator and vendor. That is, both are used in the online sports wagering as well as skills-based amusement game. So if you think of an operator for skills-based amusement games as an establishment operator, and rather than vendor, a game supplier, that may allow you to distinguish between the two terms that are used in both of those statutes. And so that's the conforming change throughout this bill, is to change operator for skills-based amusement games to establishment operator, and vendor to game supplier, just for skills-based amusement game. Of course, a game supplier is the person that leases or has the machine and brings it to the bar or the smoke shop, and the establishment operator is the person who owns or leases the smoke shop itself and runs that establishment. Then the committee heard that smoke shop as a definition could be refined at the last meeting. And so I reached out to interested parties and received their suggestions on how to reword smoke shop. And you see that change on page 4. A smoke shop would mean a business that derives 50% or more of its gross annual revenue from nicotine products and that contains a humidor on the premises of the business. A smoke shop shall not include a business that sells only electronic cigarettes, eligible products, vapor materials, or THC. And then the definitions of edible products, vapor material, and THC and electronic cigarettes are borrowed from 14.3.301.
So Tamara, could you just explain what some of the issues were, or that were, or Tom, someone, just so we know what we're trying to solve. And then when we go to comment on this, from our participants, just give us your feedback on that as well. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that. The issue that was brought up at our meeting in Laramie in May was that there's smoke shops that are using multiple LLCs at the same location to be able to get around the four machines per location cap that is in place for skill games. And so when we put the 4 machines per location in statutes a few years ago, we meant it just as that, and it's being construed otherwise. So we're just trying to ratchet it down so that if 105 Elm Street is the location, they'll only have 4 games at 105 Elm Street. They won't have 8 or 10 or 12 games because they have used it under different corporations or LLC type licenses. That was the issue we're trying to ratchet down and get a handle on in that regard.
And so my comments on that is, I'm not sure that this language does exactly that, because it doesn't limit to an address. And it's only a 50% rule. And so I just want to, if we have comments from the participants of better language or additional language to do what we want it to do, we welcome your comments today or in the next few weeks, because obviously all of these bills are not going to be finalized today. This is just our first round to expose the bills to everybody to think about and to review and give us further comments. And then all the bills will basically be reassigned to the working group to be worked further. So I don't want you to think of that. You've got to jump up and pound on the tables today. It's a little early for that. This is just our first round, just so everyone knows.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Go ahead.
So it's the language on page 4 we're talking about is supposed to limit the LLC abuse? Yeah.
Definition of smoke.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
That's sort of a 2-part. On page 4 and page 8 deals with trying to limit ways that businesses have possibly tried to get around the 4 skills-based game per business, per establishment limit.
Still needs work. And then, Mr. Co-Chair, just one other question. So if I've got a smoke shop and I don't have the machines and I get more than 50% of the revenue, I bring 4 machines in and all of a sudden less than 50% of my revenue comes from tobacco. Does the game revenue count against my 50%, or is it 50% from tobacco excluding the game revenue? I don't know how big an item game revenue is. I don't care which way it goes. I just want to be clear. Thanks, Tamara.
Yeah, I had the same questions.
By the words of the statute, and this is existing law since these definitions and limitations were put in place on skills-based amusement games, and that just derives 50% or more of its gross annual revenue. So whatever gross annual revenue of the business, it's not limited to just revenue from their nicotine products. Right, on page 5, you see more conforming changes to skills-based amusement game to change operator to establishment operator and vendor to game supplier. On the bottom of page 5, this is the statute that relates to advanced deposit deposit wagering, or ADW. This is a type of pari-mutuel wagering. It's by electronic device or by calling in by phone when you have an account set up with the pari-mutuel licensee or permittee to bet. This would raise that age from 18 to 21. And on the top of page 6, that conforms, raising the age to 21. Then the middle of page 6 is 1125-205. These are all pari-mutuel events. This would raise the age from 18 to 21. On the bottom of page 6 is the conforming change from vendor to game supplier. Same thing on the top of page 7. And then on the bottom of page 7 onto page 8, we get to that change to try to limit multiple LLCs operating in one building. And
Mr. Co-Chair. Tamara, let's backtrack to vendor and game supplier for me, because I recall on the skills, there's always this question. The people who actually own the machines and are leasing it to some local guy who's placing it in the bars, I thought they were the game supplier, and then the person distributing them to the bar, they were the game vendor. What under these definitions, the people who actually own the machines and are leasing them to the people putting them in bars, what is the terminology for them?
the game supplier is the person providing the physical machine to the owner of a business, the owner of a bar.
Okay, going upstream, there's somebody out of state that owns these machines, manufactures these machines, that's leasing them to the game supplier. Do we have a term for that in code?
I think that's as high as upstream as we get, is the game supplier in the code, or with the new definition. It's currently vendor, and it just means a person who owns and distributes a skills-based amusement game to an establishment operator for profit.
Okay, on HHR, don't we go further upstream than that? On HHR, don't we go up to the people who actually manufacture and own the machines and lease them to the horse palaces? Am I wrong?
On HHR, we're dealing with simulcasting, and statutes are pretty minimal on that type of thing, on simulcasting, on who owns a machine. We don't even talk about machines in statute. All we say is that the Gaming Commission may permit simulcasting on historic events. And, that's the statute. What you then get into is the rules and regulations, which do include more direction on that.
On more direction on that being the manufacturers of the machines?
So you might have
Thank
to
you,
try-
committee members. Thank you, Chairman Kinski. I think the question was, the latest question was, are we licensing the manufacturers with historic horse racing? The answer is yes, we do that. We're able to do that within the rules. And so one of my suggestions in this bill would be to license the manufacturers and for the skill games.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. And then Tamara, what you read is that the game supplier owns and distributes the machines. I think they don't own them. I think they're leasing them and distributing them. And there's a manufacturer that they're leasing them from. So it's just make a note, that's something we want to follow up on and factually determine whether that's the case. I don't think these people own the skills machines. Just like the HHR people don't own their machines. Is that right, Charlie?
Chairman Kinski, thank you. With the historic racing, it's a blend. They own and they lease some of the machines.
Okay.
It kind of depends. I know with the skill-based amusement games, I think primarily those are owned by the supplying operator.
Okay,
which
Mr.
is
Co-Chair,
licensed.
if I may. And the reason we want to have the manufacturers looped in is we've got to make sure the machines are certified as legit, correct? And that falls to the manufacturer of the machine or whoever's servicing the machine, or both.
Chairman Kinski, again, thank you. Yes, The machines are all certified. We received lab reports on that. But, in gaming, manufacturers are typically also licensed across all different types of gaming, and that would be my suggestion, would be to add that in there. And, that also
So,
adds...
Mr. Co-Chair, so Charlie, to add that in there, you mean to add to the skills game the same
Yes.
requirement for certification we have for HHR manufacturers? Is that
We
right?
would want to make, Chairman Kinski, we would want to make sure that we're licensing the manufacturers of the skill-based amusement
Okay,
games.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you, Charlie.
And so as we do this, once again, for the participants, we welcome your draft language to make sure we cover it all. And anyone that has, general concept, anyone who has control at any point in time from manufacturing to the floor of when you're playing it needs to come within the jurisdiction and the authority so that we can monitor and control or do what is necessary through the commission.
Mr. Co-Chair, I do want to say
Do
with
statutorily.
deference to the working group, I do understand this bill is not intended to do all those things, Representative Walters, that you're going after some low-hanging fruit here. I'm just trying to make sure I'm following the general scheme of things. So I didn't volunteer for the working group, so I want to be respectful of your work.
You'll be volunteered again. Go ahead, Tamara. Go ahead.
Representative Stith and I were hashing up old ghosts over here on this conversation on manufacturing, and it sticks in our mind that as we had this conversation before, it's who's the manufacturer. It is the manufacturer of the individual components, the end manufacturer of the machine, and I don't know that we've got that ever finally defined appropriately that satisfied us in statute, and is something that we need to get worked on. But is my recollection the same as everybody else's on that we kind of got tangled up in that mess and we need to get that figured out?
So on the bottom of page 7, beginning on the top of page 8, is this change to the restrictions on skills-based amusement game. Existing statute says no establishment shall have more than 4 skills-based amusement games operating for play at any one time. This bill would strike at any one time and say would not have more than 4 operating for play on the premises of the address of the establishment. An establishment operator shall not operate multiple establishments at any physical location for purposes of avoiding the restrictions on this subsection. Then the remaining on page 8 and page 9 are those conforming changes for establishment operator and game supplier. And then the same thing on page 10 and page 11.
Put on page 8, explain the language where you're trying to capture the LLC, multi-LLC components.
So this was trying to make it clear that you can't have one building with multiple establishments in it. Every establishment may only operate 4 games. And so if you have one large building with multiple LLCs in the building, they would each get 4. And so you could have 8, 16, 32, depends on however many establishments you were able to put into one place. And we heard at the May meeting that this was a problem. I'm not really aware of where or when or why this has happened. But this language would try to clarify that the establishment is tied to a physical location, an address. And within that address, that limit is 4. And then if there was any ambiguity or other loopholes, it would go on to say that establishment operator shall not operate multiple establishments at any physical location for purposes of avoiding the restrictions of this subsection. That would grant the Gaming Commission or whatever entity is regulating this in trying to shut down any ways that an establishment operator was getting around the 4 per place limit.
So I'm just curious about that. If there are some buildings that have two addresses, 247 and 249. It's like an apartment. So if it's one building, first, different distinct addresses, how does that language work?
Yeah, the first sentence limits it 4 per premises of the address. And then the second part relates to any physical location. And the intent with that was to provide some leeway to the regulators to say, okay, yes, you've got apartment A and apartment B, or suite A and suite B in your truck stop, but you did that, you went and applied for different apartments or different division of a building in order to avoid the 4 limit. This is still one physical location.
So in public comment, I'd be curious to have providers explain what this issue is and what exists, and just so we understand it better on the ground. So go ahead, Tam.
So I think that's your 0062. It's kind of a catch-all bill, just titled Gaming Amendments. I can move on now.
Do one bill at a time.
Oh, one.
So public comment on 162. Come on up.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Catherine Wilkinson on behalf of Cowboy Skill and Pace-O-Matic, joined by Jonathan Downing. Mr. Chairman, we do stand in support of this bill and thank the committee for their work to address it. We do have a few comments on there. In terms of the definitions, we would request that you do insert a manufacturer definition. We're happy to share the language with the committee. Brief language of that is dealing with the software. So a recommended definition, and we can share this, would be a person engaged in the business of constructing skill-based amusement games or software, or selling skill-based amusement games to a software to vendors. So we do think that it is important that the manufacturers are licensed. That was in earlier iterations. There was trouble with finding the correct words, and it was ultimately dropped, but we do think it is appropriate to license that at that level.
Mr. Coacher.
Go ahead.
Quick question. How does that line up with the definition that we already have in the regs?
Mr. Chairman, there is not a definition in the regulations, I don't believe, currently
Okay.
for skill-based amusement games.
So this be a fruitful area for a conforming amendment across all types. Thanks.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we do have a little bit of concern about the proposed new terms for what is currently the vendor and the operator. So in this bill, the operator is the location, and then adding establishment, we think that it should just be establishment or location. So in the industry, what is currently defined as vendor are operators. They're just terms, the definitions are correct, but if you're just changing the terms, we prefer location or establishment for the operators and operators for what is currently vendor. The other terms are just a little bit awkward, and there's no point in changing them as they're already currently defined. So if you want them correct with industry, those would be the recommended changes we have.
Chairman? Mr. Chairman, just going back so I get this correct, on page 4 where it says, where we were discussing changing it to establishment operator, what is the term you would use for that? You say you like the definition, but what's the term you would use to replace establishment operator?
Mr. Chairman, so we would recommend either establishment or location.
So on line 2, read how you would have that.
Establishment or location means a person who possesses and operates an establishment where skill-based amusement games may be played for profit. We're happy with the actual definition, it's just the term of whatever you're going to call them.
Mr. Chairman, follow up, and you'd get rid of operator? Delete through operator?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct, delete operator.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, so down below where they're suggesting game supplier, we would then suggest removing vendor and replace that with operator. That is the term that we use in the industry. But like I said, if that, there's no point in changing it if you're happy. The definitions are fine, it's just the terms, but the suggested terms are just a little awkward.
So at some point, Director, I'd like you to comment on that as well. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, other comments we would have, we do like that smoke shop definition. We were seeing kind of some loopholes. They were really very much intended to be in a smoke shop of like a 21 and older age environment. Seeing a lot of the shops that are coming and creating a separate LLC, which is another issue where it would then have more games than were intended. They were really meant to be a supplemental entertainment game or separate entertainment and not have just skill games everywhere. So that was a loophole. We do appreciate the language of smoke shop. We do think that that addresses the concern.
Catherine, going back to your definition of the manufacturer, you referenced the machine and the software. Could the machine manufacturer be different than the software manufacturer? I'm trying to conform those two, or if they need to be somehow separate. Help me with that, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, so a lot of the cabinets are manufactured separately from the software, and then they're putting together. So I think the or in that definition, so manufacturer means a person engaged in the business of constructing skill-based amusement games or software, or selling skill-based amusement games to software.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. So in my mind, I'm thinking of that cabinet and software as a completed item. And where the person gets the software for so is the manufacturer the software guy that then farms out the creation of the cabinet to sell the product, or is it the cabinet maker that then is getting a contract for a software developer? It's the other way, it's the first way. So it'd be the software guy is developing this software, and then he reaches out and has the cabinet design to fit his software, right? And if that's right, it seems to me that would, somehow we got to get that to be the term and not have them two.
So, Mr. Chairman, Matt Pascal, who is one of our colleagues here, could address that question if that's all right.
Please, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for having us. So it's a good question. At the end of the day, the software is what needs to be licensed. The manufacturer, the software is the most important thing. The manufacturer of the software then has to work with lots of different companies, just like building a car, right? So you've got all the other pieces where there's the printer, the bill acceptor, the screen, those kind of things, and the firmware has to work with the software. At the end of the day, the Wyoming Gaming Commission works with independent laboratories to approve the software. The software has to be approved to be legal in the state of Wyoming, and that has to run with all the other pieces of the cabinet itself. So at the end of the day, the manufacturer, it starts with the software, and then the cabinet comes with that, but it should all be one piece, if that makes sense. Hopefully that's clear. Thank you.
Chairman?
Please.
Mr. Chairman, so you certify the software, and then he could put that in any hardware, any machines that he can sell it to, right?
Mr. Chairman, reasonably, that's correct, but the software can only work with certain peripheral units that would also be part of that software approval, right? So the software has all the peripherals that it can run with, the bill acceptors, the printers, the screens, things like that. the box, let's call it a box, right? The cabinet itself is relatively irrelevant, right? What's important is with the interaction with the player, and that's what the software gets approved, is all those, the firmware with all those peripherals.
Is firmware software?
So firmware, so the peripherals, printer, bill acceptor, screen, they all have their own software. That's called firmware. So the actual gameplay software has to be able to run with, talk to that firmware.
Simsted.
Mr. Chairman, so Ms. Wilkinson, what Mr. Pascal said seems to make a lot of sense, and it sounds like from what he said that for a given machine you're going to have one manufacturer, whereas your proposed definition seemed to allow for the possibility of having multiple manufacturers for the same machine. Could you address that?
Mr. Chairman, we'd be happy to work with the, I mean, this was a definition that I had pulled from before with anticipation of having this discussion of why manufacturer should be included in the licensure. So we'd be happy to work and look at language, as you mentioned and recalled before. That was, I think, one of the issues where we are trying to address all the applicants and the people that were interested in having skill-based amusement games and the different ways that those games came to the operators.
Yeah, and this kind of tracks down our previous conversations because we've had these. And the question is there any way a firmware could interrupt or change or modify the underlying software? And knowing, and so the concept was, well, we need to make it tamper-proof in some fashion or another, and be able to cross-check whether they're tamper-proof. So I think all of that is wrapped into the same idea that we're concerned about.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, a second part of that definition that I didn't read was, I think, trying to address that. They had imposed a licensure fee before and then added the language. Of course, now I don't have it, but basically that they cannot tamper and that there is a certification process that once a machine goes to the operator, that it cannot be tampered with. And we did have that language on there. Of course, I can't find it now up here, but we do have that.
Okay, so you can get that to us as well, please. Further questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think part of the confusion is the term manufacturer, and we all think manufacturer is hard goods and things like that. And I think realistically, the software provider is the manufacturer, right? I think those two terms are reasonably interchangeable for this concept. And again, I think from to your point, can the firmware affect the gameplay? And when the software goes in for approval, it has the listed firmwares available inside of that software. So it's already tested. So additional peripherals can't be put in without that firmware being added to the software. So any other piece of material that would be plugged into the machine wouldn't work on that particular version of software that's already provided. So at the end of the day, if you approve a software provider, if you want to call that a manufacturer, to me that's where you ought to be, and that takes care of the concerns.
We're getting there.
Yeah, that's right.
Good conversation. And so then a software provider would not then be considered a vendor. We're trying to get to the
Correct.
to the root, right? And so we want to make sure it's that where the genesis, where the creation takes place. And a provider wouldn't be somebody that could just be a vendor. It would have to be, I just want to make sure that we're talking the same language, because you guys talk different language than the rest of the world.
Fair enough. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, yes, so that's exactly right. So from the hierarchy, from my perspective of licensing, it would be software provider, manufacturer, vendor, location, establishment.
Mr. Chairman, I had a few other comments on the multiple LLCs, and I give that over to Mr. Downing.
Good morning, Member of the Committee, Jonathan Downing. On the multiple LLC language within the bill, there have been comments in some of our interactions with Gaming Commission staff on a desire to try and close those loopholes. And so that's the intent behind those pieces there. When skill games were brought into Wyoming and we sought a regulatory framework along those lines, it was mainly to ensure that there are places where skill games should be and where they shouldn't be. It was also a desire to have them as supplemental revenue for your VFWs, your Elks Club types of organizations, your American Legions, your bars, and having that entertainment device alongside, whether it be your jukeboxes, your pool tables, your dartboards. And so when you got into the language of having multiple LLCs as far as the tobacco shops side by side, that was going against some of that intent, which had been brought to us by some of your peers as we've gone through this regulatory framework over the years and sought to have those sideboards in place because it's very much a different product from other types of gaming facilities that are in Wyoming that do not have those limits of 4 games per location. And so with that, if there's questions as far as the premises side, we believe that it captures that more closely. But clearly when you're having essentially, for the lack of a better term, a strip mall or a multiple office location where you'd have 4 games per room type of thing with separate LLCs, and that definition as far as tobacco shop, those were the concerns, and I think we've gotten closer on those, but we'd be open for some questions on that end too, if that's helpful.
Further questions? Okay, other public comment on the bill, on the draft. Charlie, come on up. The other folks can come on up and fill their seats while we're waiting.
Thank you, Charles Moore, the Director of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. Just real quickly to kind of maybe try to clear up the manufacturer conversation that we had. When a game goes to the laboratory, it's all inclusive. It's the box, it's the complete game. Now, there are certain times after that initial testing has been done with the laboratory that it's just the software, the gameplay that affects gameplay. But that whole cabinet goes and is tested. We receive test results that encompasses all those pieces when those come through to us. In a follow-up with that, when a new game comes to the state of Wyoming, is being proposed, that game, the full box, ready to run, comes to our office. We have that in our office, and we spend a tremendous amount of time testing that in our office to make sure that interaction. I think the definition could be as simple as skill-based amusement game manufacturer means a person or corporation that manufactures skill-based amusement games for distribution to a vendor or game supplier. I think it could be just as simple as that, and we would have that. We would be at the root of the problem, I think. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions for Charlie on this issue? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mike Mosier, Wyoming State Liquor Association. I'll be brief because I'm not nearly as bright as my predecessors. It seems like we pass statute in the next couple of years. We spend clarifying what we sometimes meant with those statutes, and therefore we support this legislation, specifically the definitions with the smoke shop. Also on page 8 with the clarification of different businesses under the same street address. I will not get into the weeds with vendor versus game supplier versus operator versus whatever. Leave that to the skill games people, but we like the definitions. We think we're headed down the right path, and we'll be glad to work on it down the road. I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Mike. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, do you have any outlets that sell THC? I see we have that on page 4, line 17. We're specifically saying you can't sell THC. We don't say anything about CBD, but do you have anybody that sells THC?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, that is a can of worms, sir. There are outlets in Wyoming selling THC. They're ag-based products. You might have seen the advertising. There's a loophole in the Farm Bill which allows hemp-derived THC to be sold. So I think that's important that THC is in there. That loophole is open at a federal level. It's been addressed at a state level in different states. We addressed Delta 8, which is one of the isotopes of the cannabinoid, but we still have loopholes, I think, with Delta 9 and Delta 10 with the egg-based products. The problem is with those products, and I will not belabor this because this is not related, but there's no age restrictions, no controls over manufacture. If you drive around, you'll see people advertising THC products. That's probably because of the loophole in the ag bill. I know some places have opened those establishments. So I think THC is important in this bill. And that's more information than you really wanted, Mr. Chairman, but there you go. I threw weed in here.
So Don, do we know if there's any committee addressing that issue?
I'm not aware of one.
Tom says he thinks judiciary is, but just check and see. Because someone ought to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dave Pickard. I represent the Sports Betting Alliance, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some of our thoughts on this bill that we're discussing and the larger governance bill. So I'll take two shots while I'm here, be less than 10 minutes, I do believe. I do have my colleague Scott Ward, who was unable to connect with flights, so he is on Zoom. If he could be entered into the room at this time, I'd appreciate that. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as I mentioned, I'm going to be very brief in my comments, and I spoke to a few of you about this in the past. I'd just like to lay out the premise that you as the policymakers, you set the policy, it's all your decision. You do it with informed knowledge of the industries that you're statutorily regulating, and then you pass that regulation off to the regulatory agency, and that, in this case, currently is the Wyoming Gaming Commission. What we would say with the governance bill that's coming up next, we're agnostic. What we care about is a regulatory regime that is fair, transparent, consistently applied, and most importantly, has the investigatory capabilities, and then either the prosecutorial ability, or the next step is to make sure that whoever is doing the prosecuting and taking those investigations ensure that they are acted upon swiftly and efficiently and fairly in the marketplace. And so that's to say, what we're getting at here is the illegal market. And with all the categories that the Gaming Commission regulates and the legislature has authorized in some fashion through statute, I would just want to share with the committee and have them keep in mind that the only category of gaming in the state of Wyoming that has a robust illegal market competitor is online sports wagering. So let me say that again. The only category that has a robust competitive illegal market is online sports wagering. We can talk about iGaming in the future, but I think it's very important to keep in mind that when we passed online sports wagering, one of the policy considerations was the fact that there is an illegal market. It has no controls. It has no age limits. It has no know your customer verifications. It has no geofencing. It is truly the wild, wild west. And the legislature chose to authorize online sports wagering to get at that illegal market and provide your constituents with consumer protections, whether it be KYC, whether it be the geofencing, whether it be the age restrictions, whether it be the self-exclusion capabilities on our platforms that provide a level of restraint, if you will, to address some problem gaming issues. It's truly what we're most concerned about when you're looking at those illegal markets, is making sure that those age-appropriate users are in a protected, consumer-protected arena. So with that, what we really are looking at, whether it be the age restrictions in draft 0062, it's clearly a policy decision, but there are impacts on both equations in the legal market and the illegal market when you make those decisions. We'll leave that up to you. We think you're best prepared and informed to make those decisions for the citizens of Wyoming. But I just wanted to share that, and hopefully you'll keep that in mind as you move forward with any of these bills. With that, Mr. Chairman, I think Scott is online. If there's any questions for either one of us, we'd be happy to answer them at this time.
But Scott, if you have anything to add to it.
Mr. Chairman, no, I'll just echo Mr. Pickard's response. We appreciate the work of this committee. We appreciate the work, working with the Gaming Commission on the regs, and we're agnostic on the bills before you that address sports betting. But we do, you asked, are there ways to improve or add? And we would ask that you look at the effect on enabling the illegal market to compete with us with your changes and what we can do to help that.
So I think the question is more what authority and what abilities exist that other folks do for online sports betting that are contrary to our current laws. I mean, can we make contracts with cell phone companies? Can we make contacts with Google, with Amazon, with Androids to catch it and stop it and block it? I mean, does that happen? And if so, we're not going to, how much time and effort and money can we spend that actually do that, both on your computer and on your phone, that actually captures that illegal market and stops it? I mean, that really, to me, is probably more of a federal type issue, to have that type of swath. I mean, how else are we going to enforce it? Your complaints are understood, but we'd love to stop it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think the question in there, I'll answer it this way and let Scott add to it if necessary. The illegal market exists. It was strong before the PASPA was overturned by the United States Supreme Court, that then allowed states to authorize online sports wagering. So there's always that illegal market. I think the sense of the industry is that what we want to do is, most people want to engage in legal activities in the United States. There's always going to be that element of folks that don't want to or don't know that they're engaging in that illegal market. Our hope and our alliance members hope to convert that illegal market, whether it be in the online sports wagering arena or in the iGaming arena. We certainly recognize that there's that illegal activity going on out there, and to get to that, our belief is that the best tool that you have is to create a legalized, regulated, consumer-protected, know your customer, geo-fenced type of operation, rather than having the wild, wild west. Now, you asked the question about the cell companies and the technology companies. It's very challenging for any of those technologies to limit those illegal activities. Look at how, I can put my old wireless hat on, but look at how difficult it was to prevent, robocalling, and we still have that out there. So trying to get the carriers to police a market that isn't necessarily robust to their customers, is always going to be a challenge. I think when you look back at the governance statutes, I think the online sports wagering statutes that we put in place and the rules and regs that the Gaming Commission have are very robust. They're straightforward. They have the investigatory authority to do so. I think what might be lacking, and I'm not going to address specifics, let maybe the commission do this, but the commission, the AG's office, our government needs the resources to go out and prosecute them. There's no point in putting statutes in place that are not going to be able to be enforced. And we do have some concerns about operators in the state of Wyoming that are operating illegally and legally in other jurisdictions around the United States. And those incidents need to be carried all the way through and to a swift and efficient resolution. So that's what we're talking about, whether it be the Gaming Commission or Department of Revenue, the AG's office. They need to be able to carry through with any investigations that go on and get those to a conclusion.
So, but the obvious answer to that from our side is, if that's what's needed, then the cost of doing that should come from the industry. And so then is the industry ready to step up and pay those costs?
I would answer in a different way, Mr. Chairman, and I'll let Scott jump in as well. If as society we are creating laws, then the law enforcement agencies need to enforce those, we don't. The fines for enforcing speeding go to the school foundation account. They don't go back to the cost of enforcing that law. So I hear what you're saying. We're getting into then a tax issue, and I think we could have that conversation at a later meeting. But I think as society, we've got to decide whether we're going to enforce the laws and to what cost that's going to take. I mean, in some of these instances, I would argue that it's the filing, it's the cease and desist letters. It is recognizing that there's an issue out there and carrying through with the recommendations of the regulatory agency. Scott, if there's anything you'd like to add,
Well, I'd add that, we could look to some other states. I'm not aware of a technology solution, which would certainly make this a lot easier. I will go back and ask the clients in industry and come back to you if we're aware of one. But what other states have done is with these illegal sports books is send cease and desist letters and send and follow up with them. And so, companies like Bovada, which is the, most recognized offshore sports book that operates in the state of Wyoming right now and in a lot of other states, but they have pulled out of a few states that have taken action against them. And so, I would encourage you to do that. Going back to your original question, how do you combat the illegal market? The state of Wyoming did the best thing you could do when you passed and legalized online sports betting in the state. That's how you get rid of the illegal market. And we're doing a good job of that. We've taken a lot of market share, but they're still out there. They always will be. They'll never be fully gone. But by following up, as Mr. Pickard has suggested, following up on cease and desist letters, going after companies like Bovada and others that are operating in the state that are offshore, there has been some success in other states where they've done that. And I would encourage the commission or the regulator who's empowered to do so, after this bill, to look at what some other states have done in that regard.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for Scott. As we discuss moving the wagering age from 18 to 21, Wyoming was an early mover in approving online sports wagering. And since that time, many other states have approved it. What is the standard? Would you say more states are at 18 or more states are at 21 in that regard for online wagering?
Absolutely. There are both. States have done both. Certainly more states have it at 21. And so, the industry is comfortable operating at 21 if that is the decision of the legislature to move it to 21. There are some states out there that are 18, like Wyoming is now, and we operate in those states as well. And I can tell you that in terms of in the state of Wyoming now, I'm aware of at least one operator that enforces 21 and not 18. So there's the industry is, I think as Mr. Pickard said, this is a policy decision for you all to make, and the industry is willing to go along with whatever decision you make.
Okay, for the comments. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Pickard, it seems like you've addressed in the illegal market, there's both illegal online sports wagering, and then there's just illegal iGaming, period. And so is your preferred solution on the illegal online sports wagering to clamp down with enforcement? What is your preferred solution on the illegal iGaming, the casino on your phone? Is it to clamp down or to legalize it, regulate it, and tax it?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stith, I think it's the latter. It truly is. The only way, as we did in the online sports wagering arena, the only way to combat that illegal market effectively and efficiently and least cost is to go ahead and legalize the operation so that you do know who's legal and who's illegal. When we talk about the online sports wagering world, we have, and we're waiting on a study, Mr. Chairman and members, that will indicate, will at least educate what that market looks like. If you'll recall, back in 2020, 21, we provided a document that said that Wyoming was around $400 million in illegal online sports wagering, or illegal sports wagering in general. We have definitely cut into that. When you have the marketing that has gone on and you have a legal market, it is going to capture and take away from that illegal market. But it can't, because again, most citizens would rather be operating and doing things legally rather than illegally. And if they're educated, whether it be through public service type arrangements or just the marketing itself from the legal operators, the consumer should understand then that their credit card information is protected, their banking information is protected. Parents should recognize that their youth are not going to be able to gain access to those platforms. So truly, the best way to address the illegal iGaming market, which, by the way, some studies indicate is 4 times the size of the online sports wagering market, or on sports wagering. And you can think about that in the respect that there's many folks that don't follow sports, but a lot of them, do play Wordle on their phone. And what is next after Wordle is maybe some blackjack. So again, our position and our hope is that the state of Wyoming would adopt a regulated, legalized market for online or iGaming at the future, and combat that illegal market. I'd also suggest that the commission address that question as well, because they have experience in what that illegal market looks like.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Appreciate it. And I will be, I think, Mr. Ward might be able to hang for a little while later this morning, but I will be here for the entire day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Representative Davis.
Mr. Chairman,
Welcome.
how are you guys today? I think this is the age-old question. How do we stomp out illegal activity, right? We went back there to prohibition, and that didn't work with alcohol, So I think what we really need to look at here is, and maybe this is a little market-driven, but how do we capitalize on what is illegal out there, and how do we protect our voters, our public? I think that's the bigger question here that we're looking at. I don't think we're ever going to stomp out the illegal sports wagering, but can we capitalize on it, make it somewhat safe for people to operate in? Same way at the iGaming, same way at the horse racing, same way at anything, dog racing, chicken, rooster fighting. I mean, we can go down this whole line. We can put up regulations to stop this, but we can't prevent it. So we need to look at how to best protect our public and give them assurities, just as Dave pointed out here, your online information out there and stuff like that. How do we protect our people? And that is for the Gaming Commission to vet these people and give them a respectable platform to work off of.
Go ahead.
So Representative Davis, I think you're touching on a couple of important items, but I think from my perspective, you're kind of welding them together. You note that we're looking at protection and then how do we capitalize? And I think that those are separate issues. And so what I think we're trying to discuss here and formulate in this is what's our policy going to be? Is the policy to provide in iGaming protection? Or is it protection, or is it to capitalize on a market for somehow revenue, or is it both? And so I think the conversation in keeping both of those separate is really important. Would you agree?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think yes, but I think yeah, maybe it's dead. Is it alive?
Yeah.
I think the answer is yes. You know, if we do this, this is what's going to occur from that action. So if we give them a good, does that answer your question? But I think if we give them a good platform to work off of, then the revenue is a bonus, a sidebar of that, you know. And then how does the state of Wyoming capitalize on that is up to the legislators. But
Okay.
you have to have one before the other one can occur.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've addressed most of the concerns in 62. If the chairman will allow this working group on gaming, we'll get back together following this meeting. We'll try and include a definition of a manufacturer for the next meeting. We will further refine and make sure we are even more comfortable with the definition on how we get to the smoke shops at one location, make sure that's fully addressed and vetted the way we like it, and work on these definitions a little further and have a more refined product for us at our September meeting, if that's okay with the chairman. And this way, we need to move through these bills a little bit, and we're starting to grind down on this one here, wandering quite far from the topic in the bill, actually. And so just trying to move it along, Mr. Chairman, and if that's okay with you, I think we'd take these ideas and take them back to the working group and continue on to the next bill, with, although I do see public comment here.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Travis McNevin here on behalf of Northern Apple Business Council. Following Representative Walters' suggestion there of coming back, when the committee does get into the iGaming subcommittee today, later, certainly like to be part of that discussion. As it relates specifically to LSO 62, again, recognizing that not proposing exact language today, just two potential thoughts for the bill. Well, three thoughts. The first being just general overall support and the direction that this bill is going and the effort that the subcommittee has put into it. The council certainly supports the direction and the effort. One language or possibility that needs to be looked at is on page 5, the advanced deposit wagering needing to be geo-fenced off of reservation boundaries, similar to how sports betting is done. So just flagging that for consideration. The second and final thought on 62 would be revisiting when sports betting was first put in, eliminating I believe it was the jurisdictional requirements, so that tribes could participate in sports wagering as well within the state of Wyoming. I know in the past, Representative Walters had an amendment or some language that would accomplish that, and we would like to, within the working committee, revisit that, as we feel like 62 may be a good place, since it is touching upon sports wagering. With that, take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Travis? Okay, appreciate your comments. Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll close public comment on 62. Which one you want to do next, Tamara?
I believe we're looking at 0053 next.
Go ahead, please proceed.
So 25 LSO 0053, Working Draft 0.2, is titled Parimutuel Wagering dash Breakage. And this relates to all parimutuel wagering. So your live events, your historic horse racing machines, your advanced deposit wagering, your off-track betting. And it relates to that amount that is rounded up from what would be paid to winning ticket holders. Currently, the licensees or permittees are allowed to round up to 10%. That's called breakage, and they can keep that amount. And that's an up to amount, so they could have no breakage, or they could have 10 cents breakage, or anywhere in between. This bill draft would change that such that the permittee would no longer be allowed to keep it. Instead, it would be deposited into the LSRA. So on page 1, you see the bill draft is fairly narrow in that it only relates to parimutuel wagering, and it requires distribution of historic parimutuel event breakage amounts as specified. And I'm sorry, I think I introduced that a little more broad than I should have. Breakage relates to parimutuel wagering, but the distribution of the breakage to the LSRA would only be related to the historical wagering. So first, on page 2, I provided you with a staff comment, and I provide you with the definition of breakage from the Wyoming Gaming Commission's rules. Parimutuel Chapter 1 defines breakage as the odd cents on any sum otherwise distributable in a parimutuel pool. Also, the difference between the amount contributed to the parimutuel pool and the total of the commission's takeouts and the sums redistributed to contributors. Breakage is used one other time within this title of statutes, and there I've copied it for you so you can read that in context. The bill would create a new definition of breakage for all parimutuel events. Breakage means the odd cents by which the amount distributable on each dollar wagered on the outcome of a parimutuel event exceeds a multiple of 10 cents. And this definition wasn't worked a lot by the working group. It was sort of pulled from other states and probably deserves a little bit of attention and discussion. Then, moving on to the bottom of page 3, I've included some of the subsections that relate to the distribution of parimutuel event amounts. So you can read that in context. On page 4, there would be a new paragraph 5 created that would say, every Wednesday following any parimutuel event, the permittee shall pay an amount equal to the breakage on historic parimutuel events retained under subsection C of this section to the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account. Subsection C of this section then goes on, and I've included it for you there just for context, even though it's not amended. You can see that last sentence that says, the permittee shall retain the breakage on not more than 10 cents and retain unclaimed tickets not claimed within 1 year following the event. Subsection D is a conforming change, and then section 2 is the effective date.
Okay, questions for Tim?
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, in the working group, the concept here was historic horse racing was brought into Wyoming to reinvigorate the live racing in opportunities in the state of Wyoming. And as we've seen the growth in the historic horse racing and maybe not as much growth in the live racing, and we see different operators breaking at a different point, the thought was that if we force all of by the state getting a little bit more out of this, it will entice the operators to send more of the money back to the wagerers. And if the state gains a little, great, and if not, it will most likely end up enticing these operators to break on the HHR machines at 0 or next to 0, which puts more in the players' hands, and instead of putting it in the pockets of the operators. Really going back at the whole, let's get live horse racing reinvigorated in the state of Wyoming. And so that was the theory behind this as the working group discussed it.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Please.
I'm curious on, and I don't know whether I'm asking this of staff or of you, Mr. Co-Chair, on page 5. They get to retain the unclaimed tickets not claimed within 1 year. Why wouldn't that go back to the unclaimed property office at the state treasurer's office like other unclaimed property? Why do we allow somebody, we don't let the banks keep deposits that are unclaimed?
Tamara, any thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know. I don't know if they are all identifiable, but we could certainly ask the industry.
The industry can help us with it.
Mr. Chairman, believe Mr. Chairman, it's because those tickets are not identifiable. They wouldn't know who to attribute that ticket to. If you walk up to the window and pay cash for your ticket, there is no tie to. If you win, you might fill out an IRS form, but if you have just placed the wager, you don't fill out the form until you actually cash the ticket. So there would just be no way to identify who is holding that winning ticket. And many of them, I'm going to guess, are lost on the floor and swept up at the end of the day because they don't realize they're a winner.
So, yeah. So then, Mr. Co-Chair, I'm curious if we have any industry data on the magnitude of unclaimed tickets. If it's de minimis, I wouldn't worry about it. Otherwise, it's worth digging down a little bit deeper as to where that money should go.
Okay, public comment on this. Come on up.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, members of the committee, Lori Urbakite with Wyoming Horse Racing, LLC. We obviously are not very fond of this bill. That is might as well be quick and blunt about this. The breakage is an income to the operators. We already pay taxes on that. We've already paid taxes on that money. It's similar to think of a hotel that charges you for internet access. Just because you're okay with them charging whatever they're charging for the hotel room and they're paying their tax on the hotel room, doesn't mean that the state should just come in and take that additional revenue. This is a revenue stream. So obviously we're opposed to it. Last year, just for your information, our breakage was $88,272. There is another operator whose breakage was $642,655. So if we don't like this bill, I'm guessing that there are others that don't like it as well. And again, we already pay taxes on it, and then you're just going to kind of sweep that one away. It's a part of our revenue picture, and needless to say, we're very opposed to it. And as far as the question on the tickets that aren't turned in, oftentimes, I will wind up with $1.57 on a ticket. I don't bother to go turn that in. Sometimes it's 57 cents. And so those are the tickets we're talking about that people probably don't cash in. I mean, it's like, what's the point?
Do you have a figure of how much that is?
I do not know. I do not know, but we will find out and get back to you on that.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So Lori, when you say you already pay taxes, what taxes are you paying? What taxes are assessed to operators?
So we pay 0.5% to the state, we pay every Wednesday, we pay the state, and then we pay money to the county and to the municipalities that we operate in. I mean, all that goes to the Gaming Commission, and then the Gaming Commission distributes it. Some of the tax goes to the LSRA currently. So that money has already been taxed. The breakage is from money that's already been put in the machine that has already been taxed.
Mr. Co-Chair. So then this would be a note for staff, or perhaps Charlie can tell us, it's a simple matter then to give them a credit, on subsequent reports. I wouldn't think that'd be a big deal if you paid tax on it and then we take it away, we get you credit. That should be a simple adjustment, either in the statute or if perhaps regulations already deal with it. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Yeah, the question would be how much the credit would be worth. Okay. Any other comments? Any other public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we will close public comment on House Bill 53. Yes, all the bills will be going back to working.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I think we can move on now to 0051. So this bill draft relates to parimutuel events and specifically to parimutuel simulcasting. It would require municipal approval. So those are cities and towns who would be required to approve parimutuel events and simulcasting. Right now, that approval is with the counties and the counties only. On page 1, the title relates to parimutuel wagering, requiring approval by a city or town for the issuance of parimutuel event permits and simulcasting as specified, specifying applicability and providing for an effective date. Page 2, this bill draft goes into the definition of simulcasting, and where it used to say the commission shall authorize simulcasting subject to the following condition. Simulcasting may be conducted off permitted premises only if the Board of County Commissioners of the county in which the simulcasting will be conducted grant its approval. This bill draft would amend that to make it either the county or the city or town, depending on where it's located. So an entity would only need one approval, and if it's within the city limits of a city or town, it would be city or town. If it's outside the corporate limits, it would be the county. So we are within the definition of simulcasting.
One second, Tamara. Go ahead, Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've received some inputs from folks in my district asking about questions related to communities, and as it relates to zoning, any zoning restrictions. Do we have anything in the statutes or in this contemplated legislation related to zoning and land use planning, those kind of things?
Mr. Chairman, the statutes do not address zoning. Zoning is a condition that's addressed within the rules, the Gaming Commission's rules and regulations.
Mr. Co-Chair, tell us about that. I didn't know they could pass a regulation that impacted a city's ability to zone.
Mr. Chairman, they do not impact the city's ability to zone. They require the permittee get zoning approval when submitting their application.
Okay.
One comment on the working group's general charge of trying to clean up statutes and make things a little bit more cohesive and streamlined is that we are within a definition section here on page 2, the definition of simulcasting, and this is a fairly substantive provision. This is how it was adopted. As you know, sometimes bills get worked quickly, and rather than creating an entire new section on simulcasting or historic horse racing or off-track betting, the definition of simulcasting was just tweaked a little bit. And so the more substantive you become, the more I would suggest that you move simulcasting into its own section rather than try to regulate simulcasting through a definition. And you'll see that in the Wyoming County Commissioners Association suggestion. We would become really substantive within that definition, and it would be a lot easier to work with if it were outside of a definition.
So Tamara, with that regards, assuming that if we don't adopt the county commissioners version, then your suggestion is that we redefine this in a different location that is more general in the through our or through the bigger bill.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, it would be a policy call for you and what kind of a bill you want to see and explain on the floor. You would need to recreate some provisions to have a section that would govern simulcasting, and then to have these regulatory provisions within that. And so it would look like a bit of a larger bill, like you might be expanding simulcasting because you would be creating all this new language. And that can be a challenge in and of itself to bring on the floor, but really you would just be moving and recreating and then getting these things out of definitions that ought to be in their own standalone section. So you could certainly move forward with just this bill, tweaking the existing structure, but if you are starting from scratch and wanting to see more improvements in streamlining of statutes, you could bring a larger bill to improve that.
Mr. Co-Chair. Go ahead. So follow up on that, I'm not familiar with what the county commissioners bill. How does the county commissioners bill differ from this bill? They're not turning, the county commissioners aren't advocating turning it over to the city, I take it.
Right. Mr. Chairman, the County Commissioners Association's draft language does not go to municipal approval at all, but it does amend the definition of simulcasting to then provide for several new regulatory authorities of the counties.
And Mr. Co-Chair, I guess to the working group, I know when this first came out, the cities were upset that they didn't have any kind of regulatory approval. I know I was mayor when I found out all of a sudden we had horse racing inside the city limits and we hadn't gotten so much as the courtesy of a phone call or an email, but maybe that excitement has died down now, or is the city still adamant they want this approval?
I didn't know you then.
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. With 99 municipalities, I'd say it's a little bit of a mixed bag if they're adamant that they have it or not. But there has been concern, and right here in Campbell County, there was concern a few years ago when things were shut down because the county was able to shut down the historic horse racing and because they didn't like some of the things that were taking place, and the city was not able to do anything about it, and the city kind of liked the revenue they were receiving. And so the city was saying, hey, we still want it here in this town of Gillette, and if the county doesn't, let the county do what they want. And so this just is, it's still a single approval. It's just a matter of if it's in town or out of town is the way it would work. It's not you have to get approval from both entities. It's just one or the other, depending on where the location of the site. And I think it makes sense as they both operate independently in all other or most other regards. Why would one be able to tell the other one what to do? So.
Okay, I see a representative. Commissioners, I don't see a WAM rep. Okay, thanks, Representative.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, page 3, you're within the statute on parimutuel events generally. And this subsection A dates back to some of the original parimutuel language. It was a rather long subsection. So one of the things that this bill draft would do is to not make it any longer without candling it out a bit, breaking it up with paragraphs and subparagraphs. And so this does the same thing, requiring municipal approval if it's within the limits of a city or town, or county approval if it's outside the limits. It just breaks it out for all parimutuel permits. And again, all parimutuel permits are your live races, your live events, your advanced deposit wagering, your off-track facilities. And so that would be approved by the governing body of a city or town or the county, one or the other. The changes on page 4 are technical changes just to allow for breaking that long subsection up into different paragraphs. And section 2 on the bottom of page 4 is an applicability section. It says this act shall apply to parimutuel permits and simulcasting permits issued on and after the effective date of this act. This is obviously one of the least complicated ways of making a change is to make it prospective. All permits that happen after the act is passed. If you want it to be retroactive, then you would need to think some more about whether entities would need to get new approval or how you would want to implement that.
And it depends on what we do with the commissioner's bill, because that would make them all time limited, right? Requiring reapplication.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's a good point, that in general with the commissioner's bill, you would probably want to work those together or at least conform them to try to think about how, whether existing entities are going to need to go through a new approval, how they should work together.
Okay, Any other public comment on this bill? Any other public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment on that bill. It's 10 o'clock. Let's take a 10-minute break.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman? Go ahead.
We did have one public comment online on this
Okay.
bill from Wham.
Mr. Chairman?
We hear you.
Okay, Bob McClure with Wham. Sorry for the technical difficulties here. Wham supports this bill. Obviously, we like local control, and if it's going to be in the city and there's an issue, the city cops are going to get called, not the sheriff. So we support this bill. If you want to go with the county commissioner's bill, we would like an amendment that accommodates the cities within the Jeremiah's bill. So be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Bob? Okay, thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
We were wondering where you were.
I'm in Jackson.
Kyle, go ahead.
Kyle Ridgway with 307 Horse Racing. I thought just specifically it would be worth my time to go over what the process is for an operator to currently get permitted for context with this bill. Because I hear a lot about the local control from the municipalities who've been talking about that for 3.5 years. And I know we talked about zoning earlier, but the municipalities have zoning rights as part of this process. So to walk you through a location that we had in Cheyenne that is potentially up for consideration on the Gaming Commission's docket. The first thing we have to do is interface, well, assuming you find your location and you get your agreements in place, you have to go to the county commissioners. In this case, it would be the Laramie County Commissioners. You interface with them, have some version of public hearing, one time, multiple times, and end up with some form of resolution. The statute currently is vague as to what the language of the resolution needs to be. We have crafted contractual language as we've gone through various counties, most of which is incorporated in the County Commission Association bill. I won't talk about that now because we can talk about that when that comes up. From there, you still have to go to the municipality for a zoning approval. The issue is that many of these municipalities zoning ordinances are inadequate or have not been reviewed to add pari-mutuel wagering or, an other activity that requires a conditional use. In Cheyenne, it is defined as a conditional use and always has been. So for this Cheyenne location, even though you have the county resolution, you go through the zoning process, which takes 6 months because you have to file your application. You have the interface with the Planning and Development Department. The Planning and Development Department gives you details on what changes they need you to make to the facility in order for you to get your conditional use, whether that's a change in road access, fire sprinkling the building, load calculations on how many people can be in the facility, parking calculations, all those kind of things. Then in going through the initial review of planning and development, you have a formal public notice process where you have to send mailings to all of the people within the vicinity of the property. There's a public hearing that's held that allows for the public input. And then after that planning and zoning hearing, there's then a recommendation to the city council, and the city council gets to review planning and development's recommendation and decide whether they're going to issue a conditional use or not. After that, if you have a liquor license in place, you still have to go through the liquor license transfer process under which the cities have the right to review. And some of these cities have scrutinized liquor transfers. For example, in Sheridan, our liquor transfer was approved by only 1 vote. After you have that whole basket put together, you still go to the Gaming Commission, and as was testified to earlier, the Gaming Commission has to review, you have to have all your local approvals for the Gaming Commission to even look at you. Then the Gaming Commission reaches out to all of the local folks that are involved, including law enforcement, the city, the county, and everybody else in their review. You then have a public hearing in front of the Gaming Commission where testimony can be had from members of the public that are concerned about the permitting. That's how the current process works. So I think it's important to understand that whole process from the operator's perspective of what we currently go through. Not necessarily here to take a position on this particular bill, but thought it was important in terms of your consideration of what this bill would do to that process. Part of the reason this lies with the counties is because the amendments to the legislation were done under the ag rules, and counties typically were the ones that regulated the fairs where the live racing occurred. And so there is some consideration that if you have counties where live racing is actually occurring, should that county have control to try to protect that track? Something that's worth considering.
Mr. Co-Chair. So if you only got your liquor license in Sheridan by one vote, but the rest of it went well, it's because we like gambling, but we're equivocal about drinking because it might lead to too much gambling. So let me ask you, do you have to go through all that if you're locating in, like in Sheridan, we have a zone called industrial. You can have dynamite and rendering plants there. I mean, you can put anything in. Do you have to go through that if you're locating in a zone that's appropriately zoned already?
Depends on the community you're in. Every community has different rules. So in Rollins, they actually required us to physically go door knock, either Jack Breer sitting in the back or myself. Anybody within 300 yards of the facility, they made us go talk to every single one of them in order to get the conditional use.
I do that every 2 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And we did that. We had to go talk to the Domino's Pizza next door, and yeah.
So what was the property zoned?
Off the top of my head, I don't know in Rollins what it was.
But you had to
zoned.
rezone.
Correct. We had to get a conditional use for the zoning. So most of ours are going to, all of our locations have been zoned because the liquor license already existed there. So it was already zoned appropriately for a liquor license. So essentially you're getting a conditional use on top of the existing use that says you can add the additional activity of pari-mutuel wagering. Some cities don't have a conditional use. So it just doesn't say, it doesn't define that this activity needs to be a conditional use. It just falls under it. So like in Casper, they have not taken the step, despite my multiple attempts to convince them to do so, to craft a special use. Instead, if you have a liquor license that's cited there, then they've decided that pari-mutuel wagering fits that use, so you don't have to go through a zone process. Depends on which community you're in and what that city council in its wisdom has adopted for conditional use permits, or what their zoning ordinances say or don't say.
It seems to me that this particular bill will drive additional obligations probably back to the Gaming Commission and to the statutory construct, just so that we make sure that for like small communities, they don't necessarily have the type of ordinances to address this, and this might either force them to do something, or they'll just start showing up in their towns, theoretically.
Assuming there's a market, Mr. Chairman, in a town of 300 people to do much, I mean, that seems to be the domain of skills games. We think the smallest community any HHR location's been in is 8,000 people. I don't know that any community, well, Thermopolis has a small location, I suppose. I think that's the smallest community that has an HHR location. Outside of that, the threshold is your Torringtons, your Douglas, your Rollins is about as small as the market's been viable to this point for our business model, because our business model in HHR is not 4 machines, leased location with no employees. It's a different product. What I would say is, I appreciate the idea that this is a go forward, because the industry has, at this point, over 10 years of historical permitting process, and this would be a change. I guess I'll reserve some of my testimony for the county commissioners bill that we've worked with them closely on, and we think a lot of that language, if not all of it, remedies many of the issues and creates additional due process for all participants, including cities, to participate if there were issues.
Okay, further questions for Kyle?
And Mr. Co-Chair, then, what if we get the best of both worlds and we take the due process protections from the county commissioner bill and we move it into this bill, and we still give cities the approval authority over? HHR location.
I guess that would be up to you all, how you want to combine them and what the feedback is from the stakeholders in the permitting entities. My perspective is that there's potential here to create unintended consequences by splitting it from where it is currently. But I don't know that we've studied the concept of matching them together. We'd have to see how the bill would ultimately shake out. There's probably a framework that's workable here by taking both ideas and making them work, but we'd have to see, what bill gets crafted and be able to give input at that point in time.
And my greatest concern is the unintended consequence of perhaps hamstringing the ability, not for the operator, but for development in the community of horse racing. If you take Shared as an example, I don't know what vision the county commissioners have, but at some point I could easily see, an effort to develop that track into something more than what it is, to where it would be a potential racetrack. And I just hate to see a city versus county thing. It'd be nice to keep the approval authority with the county if they had a vision for really bumping up horse racing in their community. That would be my only reservation about putting it to the cities. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Okay, further comments? Okay, now we'll close public comment and we'll take a 15-minute break and be back and move on to the next bill. And when we start off, I think I'll call up ex-speaker Love now to talk about the governor's ideas on the bill of, just so you don't have to sit here all morning. Okay. Okay, we're back and going live. Next up, so the first thing we're going to do is take comments from Mr. Lubnow on behalf of, as the liaison to the governor's office. And then we'll have Jeremiah work through the simulcasting county commissioner bill, and then we'll take up our last bill after that and kind of public comment as we go. So with that, Mr. Lubnow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Welcome to Gillette, and thanks for joining us here in my hometown. Please enjoy the facility that Senator Anderson was instrumental in laying the groundwork for and creating. I bring greetings from the governor's office on this difficult task of understanding and figuring out our gaming statutes. As I've told you before, as liaison, I try to separate out my personal wishes and feelings from those of the governor. I'm not a policymaker. I just observe and carry messages between the governor's office, the Gaming Commission, and you all. The governor knows and understands that this body is the policymaker and that how the decisions on gaming in the state of Wyoming look are up to you. But given the scope and importance of this topic and the exponential growth in the industry, I'm tasked with sharing with you the following wish list. First and foremost is safety for the riders, the public, and the horses. Ensuring tracks are safe and for the horses is a paramount concern. Second, on the topic of safety, the gaming industry should be safe for the public. Any regulatory body should both have the strength and the background to regulate the industry and the power to stand up to what has grown into quite a powerful industry in the state of Wyoming. The Gaming Commission is more than a revenue collection entity. The commission is in charge of track safety, game inspection, auditing, and acts as a law enforcement body. The commission has just a very broad mandate, and they work. I mean, we're riding these commissioners hard and putting them up wet, to use a horse term, with 12 meetings a year, plus meetings like this, plus interim topics. It's a huge burden, and you owe a debt of gratitude to those members of the commission for the work that they do on that. Independence and competence should be keys in the underlying structure of the Gaming Commission, not only with horse racing, but with other gaming as well. Next, the scope of gaming in Wyoming. This body should determine how much of a good thing is too much. Last year, $1.9 billion was bet on legal gaming in Wyoming. What is the acceptable level of gaming that this body wants to see before it becomes a problem? Currently, under the statutes, the Gaming Commission has little ability to limit the number of authorized games. If the applicant meets the qualifications, the applicant gets approved. And the Campbell County lawsuit proved that limiting gaming can be an expensive proposition for the most recently settled lawsuit in Wyoming, where the commission issued exclusive rights to one gaming entity over two other gaming entities that were open here in Gillette. Coupled with the Gaming Commission's ability to limit gaming should be elements of local control. We all have heard the mantra, the government closest to the people governs best, and if there are problem issues, those facilities should have the ability outside of zoning and liquor license changes to regulate that. Finally, the transfer to the Department of Revenue seems like a bad idea. And I'm wondering if anybody's spoken with the Department of Revenue and Brenda Hansen about this topic. Burying an agency within an agency isolates the agency. We suggest you look at a professional qualified commission structure. The revenues are certainly there to pay for it. Additionally, the Gaming Commission is more of a law enforcement body than a revenue collection agency. The Department of Revenue is an entirely different paradigm than what you do, and moving into that agency is in many ways outside the scope of their experience. Having commissioners who reside all over the state of Wyoming and live in local communities makes the agency far more responsive than one or two or however many bureaucrats living in an agency. And then I guess depending on who the governor is giving another law enforcement agency inside a police, giving a law enforcement agency to a governor inside an agency seems like one of those ideas we ought to really think about. Having a citizens commission with qualifications and background seems like a more responsive plan for the public. Finally, making sure prosecutors are trained and able to prosecute crimes committed under the gambling statutes is important. I just heard here earlier that people are gambling illegally in the state of Wyoming. Well, those are hard cases to prove. And there are some counties in Wyoming where gaming crimes are a low priority for prosecution because they are hard and expensive. So adding into the structure the ability for prosecutors who are trained and understand how to prosecute gaming crimes might be helpful to the whole state. Governor, thanks you for your consideration of this difficult issue and looks forward to seeing your carefully considered work product. With that, I'd stand for any questions.
Questions for Tom?
Tom, it's always good to see you. You said there's illegal gaming going on, to quote Claude Rains in Casablanca. I'm shocked, shocked to hear that. I have not talked to Brenda Hanson about the transfer to the Department of Revenue because it seems like such a manifestly and obviously bad idea that I didn't even think it was necessary. It's not a question, but I just want you to know that's why I haven't talked to her.
I think that I haven't talked to Brenda, but other people who I work for have. I think they would agree with you.
Tom, I do have a question because you use two different terminologies. You talked about a citizen board and you talked about a professional board or commission. And those those are two different things.
Okay, well, in my mind, they're not. It's a professional citizens board. I think you need to have this. You have all learned now, or probably knew before I knew, how technical and difficult these issues are. And we've got a citizen commission now that deals with that. I think you need a professional, nominated, confirmed commission. And if my terminology was vague, what I mean is a professional citizens commission where you pay people, they're nominated by the governor, confirmed by the Senate to serve on the commission, and that's their job. And it's sort of like the PSC structure, where they have the ability on a full-time basis to learn and understand this industry. I can't predict the future. I am concerned, and this is me speaking, not the governor, so I'm taking off my governor's liaison hat and putting on Tom the Blowhard hat. I'm concerned that as revenues from minerals decline, the hesitancy of the legislature to consider new and different tax structures will look to gaming as an income source for the state of Wyoming. I think that if that happens in the future, you need to have a structure in place that's able to adapt, because what we know now is that things get way out ahead of us and then we have to work at meetings like this to reel them back in. I don't know if that's going to be the future or not, but I think it's an easy thing to look at rather than saying, well, maybe we should consider a state income tax like my old friend John Hines did with Tax Reform 2000, which back in the late 90s made him a pariah in the state of Wyoming. But as you'll recall, back in those days, we had to wait for a lady to die to balance the state's budget. We have some awful economic realities facing us in the future. And so that's one of the concerns I have. I don't know if the governor shares that concern. And I don't know if I answered your question.
Obviously, he does. He's doing lots of things to try to fix it but on a daily basis. So questions for Tom? Okay, appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
So during Tom's heyday in the Wyoming legislature, he used to live in my house. And so anytime you come back, you're welcome back again, Tom. Okay, with that, Jeremiah, come on up. We'll work on your draft real quickly.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I didn't testify on the municipal bill, but I just wanted to make a couple of comments as I lead into my testimony about the draft that I provided you. First off, this isn't an us versus them situation in terms of the counties and municipalities. So I don't want to go there. But I would just express that what you find in that bill, frankly, just perpetuates the problem that exists today that my legislative draft tries to address. And I'll get into that a little bit more. And I also think we have to avoid this incorporated versus unincorporated distinction because well, for a variety of reasons. First off, every municipal resident in the state of Wyoming is a county resident. Second, the vote when you move to approve parimutuel gaming in a community is countywide. It's not municipal. There's no distinction there. So we have to just kind of be careful about some of these things. And I think that the county ultimately has some interest in that gaming activity that happens in municipal areas. And if I can, just to correct one thing from my good friend from the Association of Municipalities, if you call law enforcement in a couple of our counties, you are calling the county sheriff, regardless of where you're at. And that exists also in about 30+% of all of the municipalities in the state of Wyoming. So let's just be careful about that one. Jumping into my legislative draft, my attempt here is to
get a new job?
No. Is to reduce confusion and conflict, whether that's perceived or actual, that it exists. As you've heard a number of times today, the statutory construct for the counties in particular is very brief. In fact, it's really only one sentence in statute, and it exists within a definition relative to simulcasting, and simply just says that it can only be conducted if it's been approved by the county commissioners. That's really all that exists in state statute relative to this. That's a problem, and it's become an increasing problem because we now have a Supreme Court decision that says counties can only give their approval up front and have no additional regulatory participation after that problem or after that decision has been made. The problem that presents is that you've got some counties that have given approval historically, very just yes, no sort of approach. You have some counties, one in particular, where parimutuel gaming has been authorized by the voters, but the county commissioners and the county attorney are saying, we don't want to move forward with it simply because we aren't certain that we could have continued conversations and pull in a permittee if something goes wrong. We have to go grovel to the Wyoming Gaming Commission, which may not be a bad thing, but they're not prepared to move forward. You have other counties, and this is really where the growing field is, who have decided to work out agreements with the operators to stipulate a variety of things. And some of the operators can speak to those, but generally where they're going to exist, what their operating hours are, I might get into, I know at least one county now has a revenue provision. So they're trying to establish, knowing that the county only gets one shot, they're trying to establish that regulatory framework right up front with the operators, knowing they're not going to be able to come back to that. Now, the issue that exists even in those counties, and all of them would tell you, is they're not certain whether those agreements might last a judicial challenge, even from the operator that entered into the agreement. So they're doing so at some risk, and I think we can correct that. And that's what my proposal here attempts to do. Knowing your time is short, I want to just jump into the legislative draft and just point out highlights of what is included in that. So I'm going to actually start on page 2 and just say from the very beginning that the base model for this, not an exact replica one for one, but the base model for this draft comes from our existing liquor license model, where we have a state regulatory authority and we have the local governments involved in permitting at the local level. On page 2, under B, Romanet I, it builds in a public notice requirement, and that runs through page 3. And this is, again, almost verbatim in this instance of what exists in liquor licensing, but generally requires the operator to come in or the licensee to come in and pay for public notification, ultimately in the newspaper on 2 consecutive weeks, et cetera. So you can kind of see that construct there. Moving over to page 4, we get into the broadened local government authority, the county authority. And provision 3 clearly attempts to delineate what that authority is and remove some of that confusion around county approvals. What's important in this paragraph as well, at the bottom of it, is a provision that says we shall not consider or impose conditions which are solely within the jurisdiction of the commission being the Wyoming Gaming Commission. We're not trying to set up 2 regulatory authorities. There are 2 streams here. There's a local stream and there's a gaming commission stream, and this attempts to lay that out. The other part of this provides for the Board of County Commissioners to modify terms of a permit that's offered if good cause is shown. And I'll get to the good cause portion a little bit later in terms of what that may include. But we do have that particular provision there. The next portion in Romanet 4 is the term of that agreement. Liquor licenses are a 1-year term. This sets it out at 3 years. That's generally to model what exists right now with the Wyoming Gaming Commission and these sorts of licenses. But it does provide the county with some flexibility to align it with other permit timelines that they may have. And again, does provide that revocation language that moves over to page 5. But the revocation language is specific to if they fail to actually move forward with the permitted facility. So in this instance, if they haven't acted on commencement within 1 year, then the permit would be revoked. There is a provision at the end of that that allows for the commissioners to extend that period of time. On page 5, in Romanet 5, we get into the renewal provisions. And at the bottom of that particular paragraph, you see that where renewal denials are made, the county commissioners shall be required to provide written findings and conclusions relative to that denial, and references to good cause again. Good cause will be defined on the next page. It says, for purposes of this section, it includes but is not limited to a variety of things. Breach of the terms of the license, a determination by the Board of County Commissioners that the holder has acted in gross violation of Wyoming state statutes or local ordinance within the county, or the welfare of the people residing in the immediate vicinity of the permitted premises are adversely or seriously affected. Similar language that you can find in our liquor license statutes. And then finally, there at the bottom of page 6 is a requirement for regular communication with the license holder. And on the top of page 7, you see a paragraph that if an operator is acting within the bounds of their permit, then they shall be allowed to continue. My intent is not to try and put out of business good actors and those that are complying, and we try and reflect that a number of times in the legislation. Finally, there's a provision there on page 7, starting at line 7, that would require within 1 year of the effective date of the bill, which is July 1st of 2025, that all of the existing operators would have to come into compliance with this particular legislation. I put 1 year in here. It could be some other timeline. Maybe we want to align that with the expiration of their permit with the Wyoming Gaming Commission at its 3-year interval. All of this is worth consideration. With that, Mr. Chairman, that's really the legislative language we've tried to put together to balance all of these issues and again, reduce that confusion and conflict and provide some stability for the industry and for counties to move forward. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I have a question on your page 6, your bottom paragraph there, paragraph 7, about informing the county commissioners with a report. Is that not taking place now, or does that report just go to the Gaming Commission?
Mr. Chairman, I do think some form of this sort of communication does happen on a regular basis, whether that's to the Gaming Commission or to the counties or both. We're just memorializing that sort of practice here.
Questions? Other questions for Jeremiah?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Jeremiah, I just have questions about your language on page 4. Earlier in the draft, you talk about the county commissioner's approval of the simulcasting. And then on line 16, the language changes to the word license. And so here's my question, and if I'm wrong, just tell me, but it's my understanding that there's a current license the Gaming Commission issues, right? And this would provide, essentially, you're creating a second license issued by the county commissioners. And so you could have a situation theoretically where someone has a valid gaming license, but they can't use it because the county commission has revoked this separate license that you're creating. Is that a fair statement?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stith, even under the current structure, an operator cannot move forward without having some approval from the county commissioners before they would get their license in that instance.
Mr. Chairman, follow up?
Go ahead.
But the difference here would be that Right now, you get approval by the county commissioners, and the gaming commission gives you a license, and your license is really held by the commission, and so long as the commission's happy with you, you get to keep operating. This, however, would change that, so now you've got 2 licenses, and even if the gaming commission is perfectly happy with you, you could get put out of business because the county commissioners don't like you. That's what this does, right?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiff, to be very clear, and this is part of what we're trying to draw here and why I've got the information about good cause and other language of that sort. We don't want a permittee to be in or at least I don't want a permittee to be in a position to come in and simply because the commissioners smell something a little different, want to close you down. That's not what we're trying to establish here. It's to establish a good field whereby you would get your license, yes, your second license, call it a permit, whatever you want to change the language here. I'm not beholden to that. But yes, you would have to get approval and a regular approval every 3 years, as this language says, from the county commissioners in order to move forward.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Jeremiah, I guess that's where I'm getting hung up, is just on the use of the words a little bit. So in my mind, an entity receives its licensure to have this anywhere in the state from the Gaming Commission. The respective counties then issue a permit to allow them to exercise that license within their jurisdiction. And so I come to the same conclusion as I read your draft, where you come in with a separate license. And I think it's just how in our respective minds we're defining license versus permit. And so I hear you saying that we can tweak the language there, but just sharing with you how I see that as to why my ears come forward when we talk about this separate license. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, entirely makes sense. And I, again, I'm not beholden to the word license. We can use other terminology here.
Reviewing, go ahead, the commissioner's draft.
But in the, Jeremiah, in the overall conversation this morning about local municipalities wanting to have a say, you give for good cause that a permit or license can be denied or not renewed. But it's left to the county commission to decide that, even though a municipality may object strongly to the existence of it within their borders. And there's no provision to acknowledge their wishes in that, which is a little problematic. And I relate that back similar to your illustration earlier about everybody's a citizen within the county. We could also illustrate that everybody within each county is a citizen of the state. So maybe it's just best to do this from a state perspective and regulate it for each county, which I think all of the counties would object to because they like to have a voice in it. And I'm not seeing, I think that there needs to be, I would encourage you to consider that because I just don't think we're acknowledging that in this draft.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, let me be clear, as I stated from the very front of this conversation, this isn't an us versus them situation with the municipalities and counties. The second thing I would say is that in my time in the County Commissioners Association, my 6th year, no municipality, WHAM's never come to me and said, we've got a problem, we need to address this issue. In fact, when I talked to them about the bill that was put forward today, they didn't even know about it. They didn't advocate for that to come forward. So I just want to put that out there as my first starting point in trying to respond to you. What I did here was trying to work within the existing framework, which is just that the county is the entity that's involved. So I worked from that and said, okay, what does that look like to put something together for your consideration. I'm not opposed to us having a conversation of, should there be a formalized element in this of communication from the municipality and the commissioners? I'm not opposed to that conversation. I just think you have to be really careful about how we approach some of this. I don't want the municipalities to be in the same situation that I'm trying to address here, that I think is going to happen if we only did the municipal bill, if that makes sense.
So I have a question. If you come back for your renewal of your license in 3 years to the county commissioners, you have a public hearing as required in here for that renewal, and the room is full of people and they all want to close it down, does that constitute good cause?
Mr. Chairman, it may. Obviously, there's a provision in here about good cause and the welfare of the people. But I also want to state that, again, this is modeled after the liquor license model that we have. And those permittees have to come in every year. They don't get to come in every 3 years like we have here. And
Yeah,
guess what? In the vast majority of those, Mr. Chairman, it's on the consent agenda for the commissioners. It never even moves to additional consideration unless the sheriff puts his hand up generally and says, got a problem.
On the other hand, those liquor licenses are treated as property, and you have a property interest when that happens. And if they take it away as a violation of as an ownership right, then basically you have to pay for it. The county does. I mean, that lawsuit's already, there's several of those lawsuits that have transpired that way. Now we've got a facility in Laramie County that they've got almost $20 million invested in a building and an operation. And if the county says no, then what's going to happen? And I would suggest to you that someone's going to have to come up with $20 million. It's just not that simple. But
Mr. Chairman, I think, frankly, we're making a mountain out of a molehill. I ultimately think that these operators are going to be allowed to continue, and we've tried to protect them through the development of this legislation. Again, this language, particularly in terms of the good cause for the welfare of the people, exists in the liquor license model. So if the commissioners came to that conclusion, they could pull that permit there.
well, my suggestion is I do not think it's anywhere close to apples to compare a liquor license to an HHR off betting location. That's just, they're night and day. So, any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to open a Pandora's box, but I'm trying to understand the situation where we have what we have inside of Wyoming, and we are where we are. And I'm building on the words that you used, Jeremiah, protecting our current operators in our current communities. We don't have a crystal ball, but there may be some activity outside of Wyoming that looks at Wyoming and says, hey, we want to get a piece of that, and they want to come in. How do you see this being enacted? Through a rulemaking process where you take that process and it goes through and each commission makes their own rules? How do you see implementing that to protect the existing sector and the existing operators as we were to transition into where we want to see gaming in Wyoming in the next 5-10 years and forward?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, I don't think we'll see all that much change. What I do think we'll see is that we'll legitimize the agreements that are being put in place or have been put in place as we move forward.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To move this along, I think this bill has some merits, has some problems. If it was okay with the chairman, maybe the working group could take this bill. We could have LSO put it in our drafting formats and then be able to look at it in the working group. We would further refine it some and answer a few of the questions that have been brought up and hopefully have something a little better prepared for the September meeting.
I do think before we do that, public comments on the draft bill that we just talked about. Any public comments on the draft bill? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, and we will do as requested. Consider it done. Thank you. Okay, next bill, Tamara. So the next bill is 54. And Tamara, this is a big fatty. So what we'd like you to do is just kind of do the highlights of it, because obviously it's and get some feedback, but it's a conceptual bill at this point, and we may have some redirection on that once this goes back to the working group already. So please just kind of give everyone the lay of the land as before we begin. So go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The draft is 25 LSO 0054, and it's last but certainly not least. You should have version 0.5. The working group asked to see all regulated gaming activities consolidated within one title of the Wyoming statutes. So rather than going to the shelf and grabbing one book with Title 6 in it, and one book with Title 11, and one book with Title 9, you'd be able to go to the green books and pull Title 9 and see all of your regulated gaming activities. The working group also asked to see what a transfer would look like, and back in 2020, there was a study by the Department of Revenue as to taking that and what it would look like, and they thought it would look like a Type 1 transfer, and so that's what this bill did, was show you what a Type 1 transfer with going ahead and amending statutes. And a Type 1 transfer is taking an entity of government and moving it into another agency. So that's where most of the bulk of this bill is. It's in that renumbering and then amending to say Department of Revenue rather than Gaming Commission, and then making conforming changes to this article versus this act and that type of thing. This includes the regulated gaming activities. So those are the charitable gaming. That's bingo, pull tabs, and Calcutta wagering. Those have not been regulated historically, but in recent years, the legislature enacted law to require those entities to be licensed, even though it's not regulated in the sense that the skills-based games or the other games are. So the charitable gaming, right now, it exists within our criminal statutes, and within the definition of what is gambling, the criminal statutes say, well, gambling is not these things. And one of those things is it's not bingo and pull tab when it's conducted under all these conditions and when it's licensed by the Gaming Commission. So we take that out of those criminal definitions and move them to their own standalone provisions. And that is the concept that you might want to look at for simulcasting or historic horse racing as well, is taking that out of a definition and moving it to its own standalone statute. Then we have the pari-mutuel wagering, your live events, and your simulcasting or off-track betting and historic horse racing. Then the ADW and the market source fees. So all of the pari-mutuel, just renumber them, take them from Title 11 and move them into Title 9. And Title 9 is your administration of government. This would be a new Chapter 25, regulated gaming activities, and then it would have 5 articles for these different concepts or different types of gaming and general definitions and provisions. Also that lives within Title 9 is the Wyoming lottery statutes. They are Chapter 17. The existing online sports wagering is also in Title 24 currently. This bill draft would take your skills-based amusement games from Title 11 and move it into Title 9, and then your online sports wagering from its Chapter 24 within Title 9 and moving it into this new Chapter 25, so they can all be together. So I won't go into a lot of details. Maybe I will comment first about what's not in this bill. And what's not in this bill is your unregulated lawful gaming, the societal gaming, your poker night with friends or whatever it may be, the other exceptions to gambling statutes and criminal gambling. So also not in this bill is any criminal gambling, the unlawful gambling. And then lottery, we've left it alone. It's already within Title IX. It would stay within Chapter 17 under this concept. So, the beginning of the bill are just provisions. Section 1 is non-codified for the transfer of taking one agency and moving it to another, or one entity and moving it to another agency, and how you take all your property and how the rules continue to be in effect. Then your staff comment outlines what the new structure would look like with this renumbering of Article 1 in general. That would be a place where you could put all of the stuff that could be conformed, your definitions that could be conformed, general rulemaking, general authorities. You might be able to put in there some more conforming provisions for fingerprinting, background checks, that kind of thing, stuff that applies to all of your different types of gaming. Then Article 2 would be taking the existing charitable gaming from criminal definitions and making them their own 3 sections. Article 3 would be parimutuel wagering. Article 4 would be skills-based amusement game, and Article 5 would be online sports wagering. So that's how it would look like once it's all clean and enacted in statute. It's not as clean in the bill draft itself because there's some creation that needs to be done and then some amending and renumbering that needs to be done. So your second section is a little bit out of order in some places. We would have a new chapter 25, page 4. So section 1 is just the transfer. Section 2 is the provisions that we need to create, and we need to create a chapter 25. It would be called regulated gaming activities. Article 1 would be in general. This would hold all of your general definitions. Right now, without substantive policy decisions, I just found you 3 general definitions. Then your general rulemaking and charge to the entity that's charged to regulate gaming. Here it's the Department of Revenue. Then on page 7 is charitable gaming. This is as close to cut and paste out of statutes as could be. We're taking these from the criminal exception of what is not gambling and moving it into its own Article 2. So first are the definitions right from the criminal statutes. And then 925-202 on page 8 would be to take that existing bingo game and pull tab game and recreate it in its own section. And page 11, recreating the Calcutta wagering. So that's what needs to be recreated. The rest of the bill, before we get into the non-codified sections at the end, this big section 3 is that renumbering and amending. And this is what it would look like if you wanted to renumber, put these all in one book and then change who would be in charge. You could, of course, not change who would be in charge, or you could not renumber. You could do these 2 concepts as standalone. The bill would look different. This is probably the biggest bill that you could bring. If you did either concept alone, it would look a little bit different, but it would be a pretty same concept. We would renumber everything if you just wanted to consolidate the titles themselves and then change article to act to article wherever need be and make conforming changes like that. So I'll take you then to the end. There is some striking throughout in order to move around and some recreating certain terms when necessary, all very technical. So let me find your next section there at the end. Section 4 are all of the provisions that would be repealed through this reorganization, meaning they are recreated somewhere or they just no longer make any sense if you're taking the Gaming Commission out of the regulation concept. On page 93, thank you, yes. Page 94 and 95 to show you what is repealed. That's not already shown in the bill. Whenever it was stricken in the bill, it might also have to be repealed at the end. Section 5 has a reporting requirement and the direction to clean up anything that was missed in this bill. And Section 6 is to clarify that this bill is really just meant to consolidate statutes. And if you have various bills running through the legislature during the same session, you go in and amend 205, and you also renumber it here. How are those going to work together? This is trying to just clarify that all of those substantive changes that are made in other acts need to come along and be renumbered appropriately. But that said, I will offer a little bit of caution about kind of a renumbering and cleanup bill like this. Is there are challenges when you get to third reading and joint conference committee reports in making sure that you're not inadvertently missing anything. If you create a new section in another bill, you want to make sure that this, whatever kind of technical bill you have, is taking that into account and incorporating it appropriately, or using the reviser's bill to make sure that no mistakes are made. Alternately, you can have every single change on the concept of gaming in one bill and try to keep it all in one vehicle, but that can be very difficult as well to have that big of a concept. So I think that's my explanation, overview of the bill.
So Tamara, as I understand it, there's no substantive change. Let me ask you first, if we pulled out of here the transfer to the Department of Revenue, what do we save, about 30 or 40 pages of this bill?
I would estimate at least, yeah.
Okay. And then you said earlier when we were looking at 62 that skills and online sports, quote, are nicely organized. So you just pulled them whole cloth in here into this new title, correct? There's no changes to those otherwise?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. I also, parimutuel wagering is not as nicely organized. It's older and had a lot more Band-Aid fixes throughout the years. I still just pulled it in exactly like it existed.
From two different titles?
Right now, it's all in Title 11.
Oh,
You have
okay.
one article on parimutuel wagering and then the next article on skills-based
So
amusement
you
games.
just pulled them in whole cloth. And then on 62, you said, where we went through definitions, you said you really didn't see a whole lot of potential to eliminate overlap, but you did fix it or try to harmonize a couple of definitions. Did you do the same thing here, or did you just leave the definitions alone?
I generally left the definitions alone. I did create a section for definitions, and I don't see a lot of opportunity to harmonize definitions, but that doesn't mean existing definitions. There are certainly concepts and definitions that could be created. You know, all of this different gaming uses different terminology for total wager, wagering, handle, net proceeds, distribution, all of that kind of terminology. You could make it consistent. It's just right now, there's not this overlap that you can make consistent. You need to create and do that intentionally.
Okay, and then let's talk about the title. Let's say this bill starts moving through the legislature and somebody decides they want to change the handle, or they want to change, the amount of revenue that comes off skills games and so forth. Is the title broad enough to admit to that, or does the title admit of it being just a housekeeping bill?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a risk of a bill like this. I don't know how you could write the title in such a way that would eliminate the ability to amend the text that's in front of you, that's in front of everyone.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Committee, any questions for Tamara? Representative.
Mr. Chairman, so Tamara, could you just remind us what remains of Title 6, 7-1-101? What's still there?
Mr. Chairman, what would remain in Title 6 is the criminal statute. So first, we would have criminal definitions of what gambling is and what a professional gambling is and what profit is, and then the prohibition, it shall be illegal in Wyoming to gamble, the fine and the penalty, and that would all remain. And part of that is the exception of what is not gambling, and that right now includes bingo and pull tabs in Calcutta. It wouldn't under this bill draft, that would be taken out, but it does still include other exceptions, antique gambling devices. You have a antique slot machine in your house for fun, you can. And then that's societal gaming. That provision came in 1982 when there was an attempt to modernize the criminal code. They wholly created, I think borrowed from Colorado, according to one court source, wholly borrowed their definition of what is not gambling to be societal gambling when there's a bona fide social relationship. I think Wyoming might be one of the only states that still has that concept of societal gaming, not of gambling, not being gambling. Other states with that same criminal code from the Uniform Criminal Code that was suggested in 1982, it's still, they've updated theirs, but Wyoming has that. That would remain an exception in the criminal statutes.
Mr. Chairman, follow up?
Go ahead.
Sorry to be slow here, but it looks like we're deleting the definition of gambling in Title VI. So how do you still make it generally illegal? Is it defined elsewhere in
Mr.
Title
Chairman,
VI as well?
Representative Stiff, we should only be deleting one of those paragraphs under Title VI.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just looking at page 94, where it looks like part of what you're deleting is the definition of gambling.
Well, I think the easy answer to that is that that wasn't the intent. So.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiff, that's a typo there with paragraph 3 being stricken. It's only paragraph D, subparagraph D under paragraph 3 and subparagraph F that would be repealed.
Okay, other questions for Tamara? Okay, any public comment on the draft? So committee, I think what will happen now is that we'll take the draft to the working group. And I can tell you that one of the first things the working group is going to request is that we create the concept of a professional citizen entity versus the Department of Revenue. Anytime we bring a 100-page bill, it's not a good idea unless you, and if you get ways to shorten it, this will be one way to do that. But I mean, if that's okay with the committee, and we can still have both drafts, but I think one draft needs to have it as a. I think Mr. Lubdahl used similar to the Public Service Commission type of a thing.
Agree.
And I think the concept is not strictly a citizen committee, but it'll have to have some type of professional expertise on that selection, and we'll have to figure out exactly what that looks like. And then an operating structure underneath it.
Mr. Co-Chair, I'd also like to see it not like our current statutes for board appointments where you do it by region and by party.
Yeah.
I'd like to not see it require that they be a Wyoming citizen. I think we need to reach out for the best, most skilled people that we possibly can for these boards.
Yeah, and I would concur with that. That's the reason why it's a professional citizen board versus a citizen board.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Did you say you would have two bills come back, one like this and one?
Well, we
like
already
we'd
have
like-
this one, but we're going to take this bill that consolidates it and modify it so it's going to be a professional commission versus within the Department of Revenue.
So at the next meeting, we'd have to deal with both?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, try and clarify that. I think we would have a bill that is just a consolidation piece that we see so that all the statutes will be in Chapter 9 as laid out here. That would be one bill. The second bill would be this professional citizen board similar to the PSC. And we would go down a route that direction, and we would abandon the route of transferring to the Department of Revenue. I believe is what the chairman is stating.
Okay, comments on that? From the committee? Comments on that from the public? Okay, thank you, Tamara. Now let's go back to the agenda, and I think we're at the point of updates from Charlie. Come on up.
Again, thank you, committee members. My name's Charles Moore. I'm the director of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. As you can see from this morning, this is a task, and I think we all appreciate the hard work that you're doing, the hard work that the legislative service staff has done on all these projects. So to update you quickly on the RFP project, that has been awarded. Thank you for Representative Larson for joining us throughout that process. We appreciated having him on board. We've awarded it to Spectrum Gaming Group. Their bid came in at $194,950. That was awarded through procurement office yesterday. So I think moving on, again, you know, I have with me today, I have President Covello, I have Commissioner Schiffer, I have Commissioner Kerr with me today, and we have Commissioner Wildcat also joining us online, and then I have Commissioner Rithaler also here today. I'm not sure if they want an opportunity just to address the committee, if that was possible. But as far as updates and different things we brought up earlier, Liaison Lubino brought up the piece about safety. We're very pleased the way the season has started so far. We're still early on in the season. I don't want to jump up and down and jinx any of it, but we've had a very good season so far this year, and we look forward, I know, to taking you over here and showing you a little bit about the racing in the different events. But I think one of the biggest things is the Wyoming Gaming Commission wants to serve as a resource to help the committee. We want to be with you on this project, if possible. If there's any information that you need from us, if there's any direction you need as far as who to talk to, if there's any other experts that we can bring in and help you with, you know, we would be more than willing to put that forward. Again, as it was mentioned with the governor's liaison and the commission mirrors all of those remarks. You know, looking at a strategic plan moving forward would really help the commission. Basically telling the commission, what do you want Wyoming to look like? And you've got my memo that was dated June 4th. You can read that. I don't need to go through that. We did update you in the memo, some follow-ups. Chairman Nicholas wanted some more information on the Breeders' Award Fund, and we provided that to you, delineated that. Again, everything is on our website also, and I would encourage you to go there as well, but we provided you that. We also provided you the information on our simulcasting and historic racing, some of the detailed information in our Appendix B2. We also provided additional information on the locations and distributions of funds over the last several years for skill-based amusement games, online sports wagering. We already touched on the gaming study. One of the other things that the committee had asked of the Attorney General's office, and via the Attorney General's office, we did provide you some information on a bona fide social relationship in our memo from some other states when we did the research. And then, you know, finally here, I think, well, there's a couple things here, but responsible gambling and the social impact. I hope that as we go through this, that's touched on. Our statutes currently are fairly silent. The only thing that we're really talking about in the statutes is the $300,000 is transferred to the Department of Health. However, the commission, my commissioners, myself, we've all had a belief that we have to be, even though it's maybe not in the statutes, we still need to be aware of social impacts and make sure we're spending some time dealing with that, dealing with those people that are impacted. You know, there's a lot of positive things that are impacted, from revenues to job creations, to tourism, but then also, being mindful of the negative impacts, problem gambling, potentially the crime that's involved, social disruption, and then just the regulatory challenges. So, and on another point too, from the last meeting, there was concerns about our Chapter 10 rules. The commission took that into consideration at the commission meeting shortly after we met here in committee, and they did table those Chapter 10 rules for the time being. And a lot of that tabling was not only from the comments from this committee, but also waiting to see what the gaming study is going to bring forward and do that. I also provided for you in your packets a detail of our rulemaking, the processes, where we're at with different sets of rules. We're working on quite a few rules. But as an agency director, we're continually massaging rules, looking at ways to simplify, try to clarify when we see we've run ourselves up against a wall. So we're continually reviewing all of our rules, and that table gives you an update on where we're at on all of those.
So Charlie, I'll just interrupt you for a second. On the RFP, when's your first meeting with Spectrum Group? And back in April, May, we had a couple discussions of maybe a few more questions we want them to address. And so just, and fill us in what the current timeframe is for what they're going to do.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Chairman, so we've awarded the RFP. We've addressed a lot of the questions, if not all of them, I believe, when we interviewed all three of these. And what the plan is now that we've awarded it, I will spend the next week to 10 days drafting the contract, completing the contract with them. Once I've completed that contract, and I mean, that's my high priority, because I know we need to get this moving. I hope to have the contract completed by the end of the week for them. That goes to the AG's office, and they'll review that contract. And then once they've approved that contract form, that will be returned to us. So I'm hoping we can ink it no later than July 15th. They're planning on starting to be on the ground. I notified them yesterday of this. They're already starting to gear up and be prepared for this. And then I think we're looking at, with Spectrum, an October completion date.
Of their report.
Final report, yes.
Go ahead.
So just, Mr. Chairman, I think also a conversation for the committee as a whole is the gaming group has worked together with Representative Walters driving this conversation. We were fortunate to get this report back in October, but it should confirm some of the stuff that we're working on this interim. But as you pointed out earlier, this will carry over at least for another year to work on stuff that this study should reveal. And so I think, exercising a little patience, that I don't think any of us are expecting to get it all done and ready to complete everything during this next session. Is that accurate?
I would say that's more than accurate. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. And just to follow up on that point, I remember when you were talking in the interim meeting and you'd mentioned this would be a 2-year process. And I totally agree. It's going to take some time.
We got to get our gambling legs underneath us.
So finally, moving on, Mr. Chairman, if I may, we will be bringing our next set of rules, which will be a major set of rules, pursuant to Senate Enrolled Act 49, which was passed this year. It had a piece in there to promulgate rules to include requirements for internal controls, pari-mutuel wagering, including procedures, systems integrity, system security, operations, and accounting. And these rules will be specific to the historic racing and bringing those rules forward. I have already, and they were adopted at the national level, had drafted a set of rules that addressed all this, that have been adopted at the Association of Racing Commissioners International. So it won't take us a lot of time to bring those sets of rules forward, start looking and having the public comment, working those through later this year. And I would say we would have those completed maybe the first of the year next year, 25. So.
So Charlie, as you're doing that, the legislature allows legislative persons, legislators, to do 1 or 2 interim educational seminar trainings, and you've been providing some of those to us. But if there are more of those or additional ones that you might want to send to this committee that you might think would be useful for one or some of us to attend.
Absolutely. Yes, I would encourage that. And again, to follow up a little on the education and the different things for the committee. When we met on Tuesday of this week, I believe it was a really good experience. And I hope that anybody else, and I understand that the working group obviously is the focus here, but if anybody else does have the opportunity, you're in Casper, you want to spend a couple hours, we only touched on the tip of the iceberg when the working group was there at the office. And after you walked out and left, oh shoot, I should have said this, should have said that. But please feel free. Individually, collectively, come by the office, and then we can start funneling things, as you said, educational information to the working group. I think at this point, just in closing, I think a lot of the things that I had written down, maybe we can follow up with the working group if that's what you'd like me to do. But I just want everybody to know this is a great opportunity for the agency, for my commissioners, for all of us to collaboratively work with you and work on making a better model for Wyoming. And as I've said, and I've said for a number of years, the way we've built this, and it was easy to build it to this point in some ways, but now we have to come back and do some structuring and do some things which will make the office's job better. It'll protect our Wyoming citizens. It'll just do a lot of really good things for the state of Wyoming. So that's all I have, unless you have questions.
Questions for Charlie? Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We hope your wing gets better.
Yeah, I do too. It's uncomfortable. I did mention that I do have a couple of commissioners. I don't know if they have any comments.
Sure, any commissioners who wants to come up or just chime in, be happy to hear from you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Cactus Cavello. I'm the vice chairman of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you today and for all the hard work you're doing. Obviously, gaming in the state of Wyoming has evolved and is very complex. We as commissioners spend a good deal of time coming to grips with all the changes, and obviously there's much more to do, and obviously you have a large task in front of you. We would like to be partners in that to the point where you consider us to be useful, and obviously if you intend to replace us, why, we'll go about our merry way. But all that being said, we are available anytime. I've had a chance to visit with a few of you in the past and would gladly do so in the future. We feel that we're in a good place for as far as we've come. All the partners behind us, whether it be from skill games, from historic horse racing, from live racing, from all the different gamuts throughout the state, appear to be easy to work with. We share information back and forth, and Charlie's able to provide us the information from lots of the different boards and so forth that he serves on that keep us abreast of what's going on throughout the nation and the world with regards to gaming and all of the intricacies there. So we are available and certainly want to continue to work with you any way we can.
Mr. Co-Chair. Cactus, I don't want you to feel slighted in any way by the talk about a professional citizen or citizen professional board, because I think the members of the board that you have now have put your shoulder to the wheel. Those of you who don't have familiarity with the industry have learned it, and certainly you grew up with horses. So, I mean, you understand enough about that. You guys have really put yourself to it. And it's just, we're just coming to that next level. We're just coming to that next level, you know? And I think we all have been through that. I've been, you know, they say sometimes in your business, you know, when it's time to pass the baton to the guy behind you. And I think that's where we are. I don't think it's any slight against you guys. You really appreciate all the work that you've done in getting us this far.
Well, and just to follow up on that, you know, a good example is this is now a $2 billion plus industry, and the impacts become greater and greater over time. And how the whole operation functions, I just think is if we continue at this growth rate, this is going to be the third largest industry in the state of Wyoming, not too far from now. So it's no different really than, you know, we have a retirement commission that used to be all state employees as a practical matter. Retirees of some sort or another. They now have close to $11 billion in assets that they manage. And that over time, we've changed how and who's on that committee and how they manage it. And so to me, it's a natural progression as this industry enlarges, that it becomes more and more professional. It doesn't mean that the citizen component will go away. It will tie in one fashion or another on part of the committee and/or we don't know how to do it, because that's also a fundamental structure in Wyoming for most of the things we do. So, but it's still a learning curve for us. We've got a long way to go. And this is really the first retranche since it started in a lot of different ways, where we're taking it back and taking a look at the whole thing. So we would really appreciate any comments from you and from your commission, informally, formally, however you want to do it over the next several months. And we appreciate your cooperation. And thanks for being here. Okay, any other comments? Come on up. Any other commissioners or other public comment after that?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Dan Schiffer, member of the Commission. And I come from a background of horse racing. I was involved very heavily in many aspects of it in California, and now seem to be very involved here. And I just wanted to say briefly that the landscape of horse racing is changing radically in our nation. And the opportunities that are opening in Wyoming, to me, are many and limitless. And at this point, we have the basic structure of this, but I think we need to be prepared for what's coming to this state. And you all need to really set a framework for us to manage those changes. It's not only safety, it's aftercare, it's a national oversight that's been enacted by our United States Congress. It is just completely changing the types of bettings that are going to be offered, the ways that people are going to be betting, the revenue streams. It's just a huge change that we're going to see. And I just think we all need to put our heads together to be prepared to deal with it and make it the best that we can. It's going to can be a huge success. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your service.
Good, Chair. Dan, I just want to say how cool it is, I think, that the Schiffer family was there at the very beginning of the horse racing industry in Wyoming, and now here you are as we are engaged in a process. You've been engaged in a process of, to quote Representative Walters, of revitalization of the horse breeding and the horse racing industry in Wyoming. It's great to have the Schiffer name back in the saddle, so to speak, and thanks for your service.
Well, thanks, and it's an honor to Brother John.
Well, it reminds me of my first year in the legislature, and I brought a bill that went in front of then Chairman Schiffer, and man, did I get a woodshed. That was Some things you just don't forget.
I'm not cut from the same cloth, I can tell you. But thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Come on.
Mr. Chairman, committee, I'm Commissioner Cura from Lander. I have one thing I really want to impress is that our director, Charlie Moore, and our commission have worked our butts off in regards to some of the policies and the state laws that you have passed down to us. We appreciate your interaction and help. My main concern is what's driving the policy to change us and put us under the Department of Revenue. Are there problems with us that have not been addressed to us, or that's my main concern here. Why are you doing away with this now before we've got the study completed, giving us some direction? And that's the heart of the thing right now, I guess. What's wrong?
Don't assume there's anything
What has been
driving.
going
I'm
on?
not driving it. I don't know that there's anybody. Yeah, I think that came from one of the industry reps.
Okay.
I don't think you need to, I would think it would be a mistake to assume that it's a done deal. I think it's a mistake to assume that we made up our mind.
I wasn't blaming you guys. I was
Okay.
just wondering where it was coming from.
Yeah, I thought it came from the skills people. I
Okay.
thought it was their suggestion. Certainly didn't come from me.
So I think there are multiple answers to that, Dick. The first is that as a legislature, we believe we have a fundamental responsibility to see what we created and to understand it. And we don't sit in your shoes. So, but what we do know is we have Charlie as our conduit. And I mean, over the last 3 or 4 years, Charlie testifies in front of this committee on a regular basis, and we kind of tend to follow it. But what we also see is the astronomical growth of the industry and the amount of money that's out there and the churn. And we're just saying we need to make sure that we're in control of this instead of that it being in control of us. And so really, this first whole year is we're learning what we need to do and how to do it. And so we need to learn from you as much as you can teach us about it.
That was the concern I've had with, I've heard it from other people, was all of a sudden, where'd this come from and why? So, and I had not heard much about it. So.
And just to follow up on that, though, let's assume that we come up with a draft bill by January. With the current makeup of our legislature, and typically about half of our appropriations bills die one way or the other. So by no means is the writing on the wall until it's on the wall, because it's a long, and the bigger the fatter the bill, the harder it is to do it. And frankly, we now know that there's enough beneficiaries from the residuaries from gaming that everyone's is paying attention to what we're doing. And that's another reason why we're doing it, is to make sure we got complete transparency. We know where the dollars are going. We know what the damages or impacts are, and that we're taking care of those in a proper function. And that we have the most qualified people running the show, so that it continues to be that way.
Thank you.
Representative Larson.
Dick, I think one of the other reasons that we're looking at this whole model is, and you alluded to it, we've used it like a borrowed mule. And we took the racing commission, made it a gambling commission, and we've seen this whole thing evolve. And you guys are putting in an inordinate amount of time from a volunteer basis. When, as you see, you look at the other commissions that are being compensated for this. We're kind enough to give you some travel, right?
Yes.
And,
yes.
And so we knew that this was fledgling and that there would be an evolution. We're immensely grateful, but it's how this all shakes out. But that is one of how can we continue to ask these guys to put this enormous amount of time in, and we have the structure that they should be required to volunteer and then be accountable for the incredible decisions that you're making for the industry as a volunteer organization. So I think
It is a big task.
it is a big
It really
task.
is. And it's, I don't think the state of Wyoming realized what was happening when this started.
I can assure you that we didn't see what was coming.
I know. I don't
But
think a
I
lot
can
of us
say
did.
that, well, particularly you, Charlie, thank you for the work you've done. And then, you know, anytime you come and ask us for money as a practical matter, we've said yes.
Yeah.
Because we see what the needs are and for your personnel and for law enforcement. And don't stop asking, educating us. So. Okay, anyone else want to come up?
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dave.
One more commissioner that would like to come up here, Ruben Rithaler.
Come on up, Ruben.
And then also Jenny Wildcat has joined us, is online, but she said that she's fine and she appreciates all the hard work that you've put in. She just sent me a text and she didn't have any follow-up comments.
Is it easy to text with one arm like that?
It was on here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Ruben Rettaler, Gaming Commissioner.
Welcome.
And I think I was never on the parimutuel board. I come in on the gaming board. And I just want to thank you folks. You know, something that's really important to me is state of Wyoming. And what you do in Cheyenne affects everybody, clear down, even little Upton, you know. And so I want to thank you guys for watching out. And that's really what I'm here for. I'm really not to see, I want to protect the citizens of Wyoming. And I think when I testified in front of the Senate, I'd probably do more gambling than anybody else in this room. I gamble commodities, weather, but I don't like to play cards because I can make a small fortune playing blackjack and make a small fortune playing with skill games. But unfortunately, I got to start with a large one. So that's kind of my opinion on, but it is an industry that is coming. Horse racing is, of course, what it was all built on. And I think we are doing a good job in the horse industry, our Breeders' Cup and Wyoming Bred, putting quite a little bit of money into that. My wife wishes I would never got involved with horses. She'd rather I'd been hooked on cocaine. A lot cheaper, doesn't take as much time. So, but it's good for agriculture. And but another thing I'd like to bring up is Charlie. Yeah, he's put a lot of effort, and you know I've been on a lot of boards, school boards mainly, co-op boards. And we had a big meet the candidates, and they was all given their qualifications why they should be on the school board. One worked at a coal mine, handled a lot of resumes. Somebody else worked someplace, handled a lot of money, and come to mind. And I said, I'm a patron of school district number 7. And they said, you don't know anything about teachers' evaluations? I said, no, that's why we hire principals. You don't know anything about funding? No, that's why we hire a business manager. I'm just there. Well, why do we need you? Well, if you want the superintendent to run it, get rid of us. But there's our superintendent. He's done a heck of a job. We're about to lose him. But I would like to say thank you, Charlie. And anything else you want me to say? But I do thank you guys, and thank you for coming to Gillette, so we didn't have to drive clear across the state. It is a long drive, so I appreciate that, and thank you for all your hard work. So appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, any other public comment or anyone else that would like to come on up? Look at that. What else? Don?
Mr. Chairman, we did insert 2 staff memos for your perusal. We can let the memos speak for themselves if you'd like.
I think so.
And I can give a quick update on your next meeting will be Thursday and Friday, September 26th and 27th in Douglas. You'll recall 1 half day of that meeting will be joint with the Joint Education Committee, and you'll receive testimony on the external cost adjustment, or ECA. I anticipate 2 tours, one of the Law Enforcement Academy and potential other areas. and potentially one of the state fairgrounds. And then I believe, based on your action yesterday and today, you might, depending on the directions of the chairs, revisit state construction, foreign land ownership in the state, and the bills that you addressed today on the working group for gaming. To refresh your memory there, you have LSO Draft 62, which was the age and definitions, LSO Draft 53, the breakage distribution, LSO Draft 51, along with the county commissioner's draft on municipal approval and interim county regulation, licensing, or approval. LSO 54, which is the conformance and consolidation draft, and I think you've elected to break that up into two pieces. And then finally, you asked the committee staff whether any other committee was working on the THC issue, and there are none this interim. The Judiciary Committee did so last interim, and they imposed that, I think it's 0.03%, but there is no committee working on it at this time.
So would you, on that particular issue, would you just follow up with the chairs of judiciary and see if they're going to do it? Because they still could. And then probably just one famous one-pager so we can know what the issues are. You could present to either us or to them to address that issue, because I don't think we're going to want that to slip underneath the rug. Senator Groom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quick, I don't want to make this meeting any longer than I have to, but thank you and thank everybody for today. It's been a great discussion. But one question I had, and I don't know if the committee wants to take it up, but I just want to throw it out there, to ask for a little short report on where we are with ARPA at our next meeting, because we're heading towards the end of the year, and I think that might be a good time now to ask OSLI or the governor's office just to give us a little report on where we are with that. Thank you.
Are you talking about for our September meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for our September meeting, just to say, how much money has been returned so far, money that couldn't be expended by some of the deadlines that have been set as we head towards the end of the year, where we're going to hit a hard stop on money encumbered. So I just wanted to see if there was any appetite for that.
No, absolutely. I think that's, so please do so, and make sure they talk about the town of Upton's project up there and see how much more money they got. We want to find out. Okay. Anything else, Don? So by the way, the working group will meet obviously between now and then. We'll take all the bills that we've just went through. We'll probably come out with some revisions to those drafts, and when those are all reviewed by the working group, we'll pass those off to the committee and then make them available prior to the meeting in the 26th, 27th.
One more inquiry. Yesterday, you asked your colleagues on the committee to determine whether or not you wanted a second working group with respect to the foreign land ownership, and if there was an interest, who might participate on that.
So I think the answer to that is, why don't you catch up with my co-chair and I next week, and we'll maybe have a phone conference and walk through it.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the service?
So where are we going next? At what time? How do we get there?
2 o'clock? I think 2 o'clock is the designated time.
Mr. Chairman, and I would defer to the commission staff or the proprietor of the racetrack. It does begin at 2 p.m. As I understand, it is approximately a 2-hour tour. Then the races, I believe, begin at 5 p.m. For those members who wish to watch some of that action as well.
Can I ride a horse?
We have lots of horses, yes. Mr. Chairman, we can all meet here at 2 o'clock, since we're familiar with this parking lot in this building, and then we can just walk to where we'll start, if that's okay with everybody.
Okay.
Sure. See everybody at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
All right.
We do have a pony, yeah. We've already talked about this too, so she's excited. Thank you.